catching a reflection in the mirror of something standing in the corner of my room, watching me, observing me. Is it my imagination or insanity? A strange hum, a flash of light. I'm overcome, nothing but fright. Otherworldly beings taking me in the night. I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. What do I do? What do I do? Where are they taking me? Where are they taking me? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. I don't feel real. I wake up in my bed. Was it just in my head? Looking at my hand, there's something there. Inside of me, I'm feeling oh so scared. Confusion and nasty fear. It wasn't just a nightmare. So loud, so bright, hypnotizing me figures lost in time. I'm tortured, surrounding me tonight. I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. What do I do? What do I do? Where are they taking me? Where are they taking me? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. I don't feel real. I wake up in my bed. Was it just in my head? Where are they taking me? I'm swelling in me. Where are they taking me? Anxiety rising. Was it just in my head? Paralyzing panic. Was it just in my head? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. What do I do? What do I do? Where are they taking me? Where are they taking me? I'm an extraterrestrial hostage tonight. I wanna run, but I can't move. I don't feel real. I wake up in my bed. Was it just in my head? Who's holding my hand in the darkness? Seeing ghosts down the hallway. There's a presence, bedroom shadows, cloaked and haunting me. Cold hand touching me. Fear overwhelming me. Tapping at my window. I can't bear to open my eyes. A breath on my neck. Floating apparitions everywhere. Go to sleep with the light on. I wake up paralyzed. Ghostly apparition hovering over me, asking what it wants to know. I'm shaking now, it calls out my name, cloaked and haunting me. Cold hand touching me. Fear overwhelming me. Tapping at my window. I can't.
So that's the ghost song. That was written by my wife. And like we said earlier on the show a couple days ago, whenever it was, we're making a new album. But this new album I think like 3 of the songs are going to be sung, or 4 of them, maybe 3 or 4 are supposed to be human, completely human done, whatever. All of the ones on the old album are actual singers, people. Those are, and the lyrics are all written by my wife, Nellie. It is not AI, not AI. And I know that people that like, they love to talk and say silly, stupid things, and they keep trying to say it was not. And the lyrics of the new songs are going to be all written by Nellie. Nellie is really good. She can write poetry like you have no idea. She's very intelligent. And so yeah, that's what's going on. She's going to write all of the music herself, not AI. It is not going to be AI. And I noticed with the new song that we were going to try and debut today, we didn't get in time. We had a lot going on, but we're going to try and debut it. We're going to try and get it done. But it is the first of many. She wrote one about Krampus too. It's really good. The thing about the AI music though is it's still tricky because you got to find the right chords, the right tone. And I watched her and Anthony struggling to get that right, whatever, somebody says, who sang the song? Are you talking about the ghost song that just sung? I forgot her name. If somebody could tell me. Nellie and Anthony know the name of the person, and Anthony just stepped out. And so I personally don't remember her name. It's like Willow or something, some kind of, I feel bad because I don't remember. I had very little to do with the music other than the Bear King and the Mummy. Violet Helm. There it is. I said Willow. I watched Willow the other day, and it was like watching it for the first time. And then like a week later, Val Kilmer passed. And I was like, holy crap, that was weird. But yeah, her name is Violet Helm. That's her name. So she's a real person. She's a real human being, whatever. But the next album is not going to be, because you don't, and it's a sad thing, but you really don't need people. I mean, you can just, especially, I mean, if you're just writing the lyrics and you know what chords and tone you want. Chris Miller says the best movie. It is a good movie. Yeah. I had seen it when I was a kid. I didn't remember it. But yeah, so what ended up happening, her and Anthony had to work together to get the right pitch, the right tone, the right music. And it was a little bit of work. It's not as easy. There's going to be people just dumping dog crap out there and because they think that they can just use AI, and it's not as easy. I can't do it because I don't really know exactly how it works. I mean, I sure I could figure it out, but I don't have time for that. And that's really not my bag. Music is not my thing. Never has been. I have thought of some ideas though for music. I want to redo the werewolf one in like a metal, like a hard rock metal tone, if that makes sense. So that one will be something that I'm looking at doing. And so yeah, that's going to be that's the one thing I want to get done, that one there. And I don't really have any other ideas other than that. And maybe an anthem for us, a PRT anthem. That's pretty much it. That's my contribution. It's like, do what you got to do what you want to do. I do what I do. My hands are full with work and with other stuff. And interesting, today I was talking to someone about they saw something weird at one of our job sites. I was talking to her this morning, and I explained to her, I said, that site is really weird. And I could get into a whole 30 to 45 minute explanation about the creepy, weird stuff that's gone on at that particular account. But we don't have time for that today. We have a guest, and that guest is going to be brought on. Am I supposed to use these? I don't know why he set them here for me. Maybe I just put them on like that. I don't know. So that guest is going to be coming on, or maybe he's using these. I don't know if mine are hooked up still. Because I know I told him I didn't like the way these felt in my ears. So maybe he was doing, I don't know. Let me see if I can get these on here. But yeah, it just makes sense because like you don't have to have somebody. I can't hear anything out of this. Is it supposed to be on? Okay. So, anyways, you don't have to have people really to do it at this point. It's kind of sad. It's convenient, but it's also you don't really need it. It's not needed. You know what I mean? So if that's kind of where we're at. It's a lot cheaper to do it that way too. But it sounds pretty good. Like the last two that I've heard. And I know Nelly put a lot of work into. I know I watched her do the Krampus one. It was very took a lot of work. It does. It's not just like you can just type it in there and everything is good. It just works itself out. No, you have to actually get in there and do it.
Okay.
All right. So here we are. Now I can hear myself.
Yeah, I turned the mic. Oh, what was that? Some kind of interference.
Maddie says the Krampus one sounds really good. There's a feedback there.
What is it?
Well,
what is going on tonight?
well, that's not good.
Trying to figure out that feedback. What is that? It just started.
Yeah, anything to mess with the show.
This just started as soon as I sat down.
I know. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties. Okay, so I was just about to bring our guest on and he bounced. I don't know if James is going
Oh, you had to step out for a second.
come back or what.
But I'm excited about this.
His internet dropped.
Man.
Isn't that weird? So the internet dropped.
So
and
his internet drops, and then at the same time we're getting feedback.
there it goes again.
Yeah.
Why is it doing that?
I don't know. You know what it is? Probably the you know how like every time we put the word reptilian in the title of any of our episodes or live stream, like have y'all seen this at the bottom of that like at the bottom of the video where the description is, it has some like fact check disclaimer like reptilians or a conspiracy theory, blah blah blah, basically saying that hey, this isn't real. Every single time we talk about either reptilians or vampires
Or werewolves.
Werewolves, especially if we bring people on to talk about them, we get some kind of interference. And then these past couple of weeks, every time we've been either doing a live stream or recording, we've been hearing these knocks, these like from the other room. It's 3 knocks every single time. And it never happens before we start recording or before we start live streaming, and it never happens after we finish. It's only during the show that these things happen. And now today, here we have James Bartley on to talk about reptilians and vampires.
Well, when I did the vampire confessions,
yeah,
I mean, there wasn't a guest or anything, but when I was recording that, there was a bunch of issues, and we had to start over a bunch of stuff. The werewolf confessions too, folks. One thing I don't know if I told you, I might have said this before on the show, I don't remember, but on the werewolf confessions, like I saw what looked like a black shadow entity like go across the wall, and then like I just had to like pretend like I didn't see it. I couldn't just stop and start going like gasping.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, but it was there. I mean,
and on the episode that we just recorded, that just dropped yesterday. Yeah, like while we were recording it, we heard those knocks again, and the mics picked them up on the in the episode, and I could have edited that part out, but I chose to leave it in because it's like this is what we're hearing every time, and it's not something that we're doing. We're just sitting here. So
yeah. James has a lot of things he wanted to talk, or that he's going to talk about, was going to talk about. I don't know what's going on, but he's done a lot of work with this subject, and see what happens. I know that he's got his own ideas about werewolves and Dogman too. If you get too real, I think it doesn't really matter what the subject is. If it's any of this stuff, I saw the most activity when I was at the house.
yeah,
And it was on the Saturdays where we didn't get a large crowd. We only got a few 500 people. And it was, I guess, for us now, that's a basic crowd. That's not a very large crowd. 400 people is not very much for us. But it was at the house on Saturdays when we would talk about the UAP.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people didn't show up because they were being led around by some crazy people telling them that we were speaking out against God, which just is ridiculous. And so some of our base quit showing up on Saturday.
Yeah.
Because we had a dumbass that was going around saying it was Anunnaki night or whatever, and he made a big issue out of it. And so he went around door to door to everybody trying to get them to boycott me. Because he said that I believe that we were created by the Anunnaki. Now, it doesn't matter who created us. Ultimately, God's in charge. We can make people.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make us God. That was my point. And when I began to talk about these things on Saturday, like he led the charge against me. So he kept at least 50 to 60, maybe, or so people that was our base away.
Mm-hmm.
And then we began to talk about, and I don't know what I believe with that. I just throw things out like this is a theory. This could be.
Yeah.
And people just flip out and lose their freaking minds but that's what we're supposed to do. You can't be hamstrung by religion, race, politics, gender. Now, all these things are labels that can't come into play. You have to be able to go past all of these, I don't know what you would call them, like labels, and just talk about it as people.
To be daring enough to question.
And you have to freaking ask the hard questions. And a lot of people, these, I don't know what you would say. I guess nomenclatures
mm-hmm.
would be the right word. I guess. I mean, you got to push past all of this, and you have to quit being hamstrung by what conventional science says, what conventional and the mainstream. Anytime you got the media that's mainstream, or you have people that are going by the mainstream. I have a friend, a beloved friend. He's in the UFO community. He's really embedded in there, but he's been getting attacked lately by them because of his stance with the quote unquote paranormal, which to them is ghosts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's been talking about it. It's so frustrating. So then you get this whole paradigm, and that mean, and so when you challenge this mainstream, now he aggravates me though, because he quotes from the mainstream media period, like every day. And I'm going like, dude, that doesn't make sense. Why are you, that media is the big ball of lies. They have a little bit of sprinkles. Like you ever go get a coffee or something, they sprinkle some cinnamon on top.
Yeah.
That's the truth. It's just sprinkled.
Mm-hmm.
They sprinkle. They're like, this is the truth. You don't see the cinnamon and sugar sprinkles on top. You're like, yeah, but the rest of it's just bitter. It's just bitter darkness. So why are you mixing all that into there to make it taste better? And they'll do anything to discredit the people who are normal. And now normal has become the people like us that are saying, hey, the world is abnormal. These other people that are swimming around in this garbage, toxic soup, and they act like that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
They act like it's the real reality. It's not the real reality. It's not. Their reality now is more fictional than the G.I. Joe shirt I'm wearing. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like
everything's backwards.
Yeah, it's upside down day. What's up, James? How you doing? One of the smart guys in this field that knows what the heck is up, man. Good friend of mine, James Bartley. How you been, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good, Josh. Great to be here. Sorry about the internet difficulties. I was
Oh, no,
just about
no.
to come on with whammo and it got knocked off, but here I am again.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence,
Could
I
be the
don't think.
subject matter that we throw around over here at the Paranormal Roundtable.
Do you want to know the synchronicity? I
Yeah,
had
tell me.
just decided I'm going to grab a book called The Wolf Something or Other, and it's a thick novel about an OSS operative who shapeshifts into a dogman and kills high value target Nazis. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
just looked around this room to find it, to hold it up, and then next thing you know, I'm knocked off the internet. Right? So
Wow.
go figure.
And, you know, that's another weird subject too. Like when you start talking about Nazis and you start talking about the Soviets, and one of the things I tell people was they don't realize that they were actually allies up until, yeah, and they invaded Poland together, and they did joint operations because they were both socialists. People don't understand that. And they did, but they're two different ends of the spectrum, but they're still socialists. One was right wing socialism, the other one was left wing. But you would look at them and you start to realize that they were performing the same tasks. And the NKVD actually trained the Gestapo on taking people and detaining them and how to do it. They were joint trained. They don't realize this, and they were together for a while until 1941. And then Operation Barbarossa broke all of that because the Germans. Now everybody says that the Germans attacked the Soviets, but it's common knowledge now from many Soviet operatives that the in 1942, and in fact it was supposed to, I think it was set for late winter. It was going to be a late winter invasion of the German taken territories by the Soviets. So the Soviets were going to backstab them anyway. So the Germans beat them to the punch, and it's very interesting if you're into that kind of thing, because I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, everybody's going to like run and start screaming, "You're a Nazi! You're a Nazi! You're a Nazi!" when that's gone and dead and over with. But the communists it's still very much alive, and it didn't matter because they were all pretty much on the same team. It was just them backstabbing one another because that's what bad people do. They just backstab each other. And I don't think that the Russian people themselves or the German people themselves are really, they're not bad people, but they ended up with horrible regimes led by people who were callous and evil and cold and didn't give a crap. And so these camps that they created, they ended up being like when the Germans moved into Soviet Russia, they were taking over these camps that had already been built. And some of them were joint ventures, believe it or not, like the ones in Poland, like Krakow.
Mhm.
Krakow was a Soviet camp, and the Germans co-opted it. And then they just started using, well, they didn't even have to start using it. They had already rounded the people up. And get this, a lot of the Bolsheviks who were actually Jewish, they were actually rounding up Christians in the beginning. Then they began to round up the undesirable poor Jewish population because they were trying to help create that, what ended up happening.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people don't realize this. And so, 150 million people worldwide now killed by Soviet ideology.
Wasn't Treblinka originally
Yeah.
a Soviet camp too?
Most all of them were. The only ones that were in German controlled territory from the jump, I think, was Dachau and Auschwitz.
Mhm.
I think that's it. And then there was Bergen-Belsen, and but people ask the question, they're like, well, these camps, like they thought that the Einsatzgruppen was actually creating them on the fly. They weren't. It was the NKVD who had already created those, and they just co-opted them. And it was weird because it almost looked like the Soviets had it set up to where the Germans had a free hand to go in. But it's actually because they were preparing for an invasion of Germany. They were going to let Germany take over everything, and then they were going to swoop in and take over. Germany's weakened at that point from a war with the West, and then the Soviets were going to sweep in and take it all over, pretending to be liberators, but putting everybody under the Soviet boot heel, and the Germans would be punched aside. But they decided that they would go in and knock out the Soviets first. So a war that really never should have happened. Because believe it or not, Mussolini warned everybody about Stalin and Hitler and their, designs on Europe. I don't think Mussolini had designs on Europe. That's the thing. People argue. I don't believe that. I believe that his designs were in Africa. I think it was North Africa because he wanted the oil fields and the Middle East. And I think Turkey was this close to getting jump started and actually following them. And then Greece was just like, a few votes away from being a party to that too. And so you had Serbia, who was the buffer between them and Russia, and that ended up being like the stopping point. And then the Germans just destroyed them. But if you look at the war and after what happened afterwards, and I don't want to get into a dissertation, I could write a whole thesis on this, but if you look at what happened in the war, like everyone that we defended during World War II became our enemy afterwards, with the exception of Britain and France. Mm-hmm. Everybody became an enemy. Like if it wasn't just absolute, militaristic hostility, it was economically. They were challenging us, and then Germany and Japan became our two biggest allies.
Yeah, it's like the only people who actually were winners in World War II were the communists.
Yeah, they were the winners.
There were no winners besides them.
Everybody else suffered for it and lost everything. And we lost 500,000 soldiers in the United States. And so, yeah, it's just, it's a terrible thing. But some people believe, and this is going to lead us into tonight's discussion, they believe that it goes deeper than just human beings manipulating and controlling things. That there's another source, another force, if you would, at play here, and that they have been for a long time. And Mr. Bartley, somebody I highly respect in this community, I keep saying highly. I highly suggest that you should go and check out his work and listen to him. I've been friends with you for a long time, since I first got started in this, and I've been listening to you, and you know your stuff. You're very well read. You're like I am when it comes to reading. And I think you're a good source. You were doing research back in the Gap, down in Southern California, when you had some very odd experiences, and you've been on the show a couple times. And I need to get recorded with you so people on Spotify who are too stubborn to come to YouTube, so they can listen to you too. What are your thoughts on this, about the reptilians? Like, they were pulling the strings. They control these really strong, powerful families that do the nefarious things that seem to be controlling us. What are your thoughts on that, James?
The fundamental building block for the reptilian overlordship is the genetic hybridization, manipulation of the human race. Mm-hmm. In the wake of the most recent celestially driven cataclysms, and they cycle back every 9,000 to 12,000 years thereabouts. And I believe we're right on the cusp of that again, because people may not believe this. I'm a firm believer in the nemesis concept, the second sun. I've seen it on a number of occasions. It's causing manifold problems with our planet, seismic activity, volcanic activity through the roof. And what happened, it seems to me that in the wake of these most recent geological cataclysms as a result of these celestial issues. And remember, like 12,000 years in geological time, that's not even a blink of an eye. That's like a microsecond. Mm-hmm. After those cataclysms, there was far less people on the surface to deal with. So it seems to me that these controlling, manipulative gods, if you will, came down or came up from underground, whatever the case may be, and they began genetically manipulating the remnants of the surface population. And then they created this hybridized plantation manager priesthood, if you will, and an astronomer priesthood. They did away with symbol language and replaced it with language, letter, alphabet language, which shunts us into the left side of the brain. The symbol language is more of a right brain kind of thing that has connections to our soul. So if you control the language through alphabet, letter language, then you can create dogmas, laws, creeds, etc. I mean, look at how it was with the Latin, how the masses were taught in Latin for so long amongst the Celts, right? It's like, what's this guy saying? I don't know. We better listen, or there could be harsh consequences for us, right? So you create a language, and then you create these dogmas, creeds, what have you, and you have this astronomer priest ruling class. That's this hybrid plantation manager, middle management between the gods, if you will, the reptilian overlords and their cosmic vassals, and humanity. And I believe that that's where we're at now. And if you look at the behavior of the so-called elite around the world with all the stuff, we don't need to go into like gory detail about what they're up to, the human trafficking and everything else. That is behavior that is 100% non-human. And people really have to understand that we are living in a reptilian overlordship. We are living in a sphere of reptilian influence. What they've done is all the worst nightmares and bad dreams of our id, of our nightmares, has been brought to the forefront and has been normalized in front of us. So it's important for people to recognize the source of this rather than fight one another, fight our fellow humans, recognize where this control system is coming from, that they've created these hybridized bloodlines in different areas and regions of the world. And, you know, without going into too much detail and becoming politically incorrect, this notion of cultural equivalency, like we're all just humans, we're all exactly the same, that's nonsense. If you look around the world, the customs, the mores, the behaviors of people from one place to another are radically different. The way they treat women, the way they treat children, the way they treat people who are not part of their tribe or clan. And we're seeing the baneful effects of that with mass migration, etc. And that is part of this agenda that we're having to deal with. I know I'm already going all over the place, but that's
No,
the way my
you're doing
mind
what
is tricky right now.
One of the things I wanted to bring up too, and the audience might find this intriguing, and you should do some research on this. We've talked about a few different places where the inner earth, there's openings to the inner earth, and why that is important, folks, because there are civilizations that have gone underground and they have no use for coming back up. And I'm not just talking about the reptilians and their real counterparts. What I'm talking about are civilizations of people who they are anywhere from 8 to 9 to 10 feet tall, because in the Dwarpa Yuga, that's how tall they were. Just so you know, that's the last Yuga, you know, the last age or whatever. And there are, in particular, like the Death Valley.
Mhm.
There's an area of Death Valley where the Grand Canyon, Death Valley, all that, people have found there are civilizations down there. And some of them, they say, are anywhere from 80,000 to 120,000 years old. And they're like, why would they go underground and stay down there? Well, if you knew that the surface was completely controlled and dominated by another species that did not have your best interests in heart, then you're going to go down there too and try to stay away from it and try to avoid it. And these places are kind of hard to get to, but once you're down in there, like the ones in the Grand Canyon, they say could be 300 square miles. And then the one in Death Valley, I believe, is almost 200 square miles. You're talking about a massive, massive area. And these two civilizations, I don't think they knew each other, but they weren't the same.
Mm-hmm.
One was more of an Egyptianized culture, and the other one was Nordic. Now, get this. The Nordic culture went to Death Valley because people see them, the natives that they're the Paiutes and the Navajo. I'm getting like jumping around here a little bit too. They reported these people as being tall, very beautiful, white looking people with long flowing hair. And they rode around on these majestic white beasts, and they don't really know there was all. And then there's these prospectors who saw this.
Mm-hmm.
Miners who are over the years, there's a whole, I could do a whole show on just that one area, but then it happens in the Grand Canyon too. And now both of those areas have been taken over on the surface, one by the military in the Death Valley area, and then the rest of it's so uninhabitable on the top. It's like the surface of Mars. If you were to go there, you're more than likely to die to try to get down there. There was a tourist from Europe that actually took their shoes off, and he lost one of his sandals. I don't know why you'd go out there wearing sandals. That's ridiculous. But so he burned the bottoms of his feet off. That's how hot it is. So people, it's really hard to find. But you have the Grand Canyon where they've cordoned it off, And the area that we're allowed to go and look and frolic around is just a small, minute area compared to the rest of it.
And in the episode that we recorded about someone going down into the Grand Canyon, didn't they find what looked like Egyptian style artifacts and a mummy?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Are you talking about the vampire, the Olmec? Which one are you talking about?
T.E. Jameson, the Smithsonian moved in and swooped all.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they always do.
Sealed it off and took it away. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what they always do. But we've done so much. I don't know which episode you're referring to, but there have been so many. We've alluded to this. What I'm saying, though, is that these beings, they go down there 80,000 to 100,000 years ago. They had no use to coming back up. And there's no sense in it because they don't have anything. There's nothing that we have that they want. They don't want our technology, want anything to do with us. Main reason, though, is not because of how barbaric and ruthless we are. It's because they know that we are literally just vassals for a higher reptilian. I could say alien, but they are not really alien. They're interdimensional. And I could say that they are a different race, but actually they have infiltrated our race to the point of there are people running around that have that bloodline that they don't even know it.
Yes.
And then they can trigger it. They can make it happen and manifest. And how many times have we seen videos of people on the news and their eyes are flipping around and becoming, does that person know? I mean, do they know that they've sent an attachment to attach themselves to it? And they have guard dogs in the form of what I believe are dogmen. And I believe that they originally, this is going to sound crazy, but what if, this is a theory, James, I wanted to ask you your question on, if the dogman species that lives within the earth was down there with them, because oftentimes whenever they go to these high-tech computer companies, they're either from Asia or they're European, and they are seen by the employees. We had a guy come on our show and talk about a guy who shapeshifted in front of him in an elevator. And not just one guy, not two guys, 3 different people have come on the show and claimed this. These were people who worked at these companies.
Mm-hmm.
They worked for these companies and they were like, dude, these people, one guy saw a dude bite a dude's head, a reptilian. He was on our show. And so, and these aren't paid actor performers. These are people who said, look, I want to tell you what I saw. And one of the guys, Nick, he passed away recently. He's from Chicago, Big Nick. I worked with him for years, African-American guy from Chicago, worked for me for, off and on for years. Very respectable guy. He was working for one of these large computer companies, James, and he saw this guy in the mirrored elevator. And it scared the crap out of him because he watched him shapeshift and then go back. And then we had these guys, they were from India. They were Punjabi. And they were our neighbors upstairs. And they told us, me and my brother, and Anthony, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
They told us what they saw at this another computer company when these people came from Asia and from India, and they saw this white werewolf looking creature that was roaming around outside, and people kept complaining that somebody was walking around with a hood and their head was snake-like.
Yep.
When they tell you these things, they're just like, these people, this is before we ever had the show. They weren't lying to us. They were telling us what they saw. And I believe that these people are being honest. And I think that what is happening now is we're having a bit of an awakening, but there's still a lot of people who are taking this information and they're thinking it's a big cartoon. And I think what it is because werewolves and vampires have become a joke. It's a joke. Yeah. It's underworld. It is. And now the reptilians, they got us when it comes to the shape-shifting. They got us when it comes to the vampire. They made it into a big joke. So they don't need to put a disclaimer when you talk about it. On this show, there will probably be a disclaimer saying reptilians are fictional, blah, 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 because they got to remind you that this isn't real, right? And it's all entertainment purposes, right? Because they don't need to do that with werewolves and vampires because everybody already believes they're the things of fiction. That's something you think about at Halloween, right? Not all year long, right? Mm-hmm. You don't think about that. But the reptilian now, they got to tell you, hey, this isn't real. Don't listen to James and Josh because they're full of crap and they believe all kinds of wild stuff. They believe in UFOs, ghosts, and Bigfoot. And if you believe in that stuff, well, you got to be a nut job. And James is doing something that I think is very, very important. I can't stress it enough, is he's crossing over the different boundaries. We are supposed to be compartmentalized and not working together.
Yep.
The Bigfoot community is supposed to shun us. The UFO community is supposed to shun us, and the ghost community is supposed to shun us because we are talking about all of it. Now, how does that make any sense? You know, that is the problem. There were only 2 people at that conference that snubbed me. They were like, "Oh, aren't you into cryptids?" And they just kind of looked at me like I was some kind of weird oddball and that I should go back over there to hang out with Ken Gerhard. And I said, "Look, you don't understand. I am closer to the spirit than you could ever be. You have no idea. I'm over the target." And when you try to get them to collaborate, they're just like, "Oh, no, 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 no. My audience would never go for that. They don't believe in Bigfoot." Yet they see ghosts, they see demons, but they don't see what the big picture. And then you have the cryptid people who want nothing to do with you if you start talking about the Fae or alien abduction or ghosts. They're just like, "This is not a phantom." Yes, it is, or you'd have proof of it. Absolutely. These things that are happening are very highly spiritual. Now, I have a question for you, James, and this is very important. I really want to know what your take is on this. There seems to be there are different types of these beings. And I know that there are times when something upsets the apple cart and it doesn't, people don't realize that it affects us. It's kind of like politics for us. It's going to be a new a-hole, but the different leader, same a-hole, whatever. And this is what I'm talking about with the reptilians. Now we have this sort of shift where we hear about them drinking blood because I believe that the real energy that we're surrounded by was originally their target. It was the human essence. But it became a physical thing when I believe, this is what I believe. I'm not saying you believe this. And I don't know what your take is on this because I haven't discussed this with you. This is the first time for us to talk about this. I think that it's a parasite. And I think that these lizards have been parasitized. They didn't need blood. What they wanted was the pineal gland. Now I believe that it's something even more because I think that they're fighting amongst themselves. And I think it's because of the vampire. And I think that that is a much more dangerous thing because it can affect animals. It can affect people. It can affect, in fact, it is universal. Whoever released this and did this cosmically. And I'm saying this, folks, and it may sound completely fictional. This may sound like something out of Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, whatever. I'm being completely honest. It was a cosmic virus. Somebody stepped into a Stargate, this is what I'm thinking, and they brought it with them. Just like they brought the Dogman. I think the Dogman was originally created by the Anunnaki. I think that they got a hold of them, the reptilians did, and they created a new species of them. I do. I think that humans got a hold of it and created another species. I do. I really believe that. And they're in these dumbs. And now when you see one, and I drove by a spot earlier because I couldn't resist. I had to take a drive, even though I was got to hurry, you know. I had to go by there. I said, that's where the bank teller is. I was showing everybody. But this, we didn't stop. We just, because I knew James was waiting, but I had to go by there. But it was just, it amazes me, the different types and the different species that we're dealing with. Because over thousands and thousands and even millions of years of different invasions that this planet has faced. And we're just one of many. These, the vanguard of these alien races, the stormtroopers, if you will. They come in, they knock out the powers that be, they subjugate them, and whoever else is already here, which happened during the reign of Marduk, which is the one that we hear about from the Sumerian tablets. It was during his wedding that he was actually, they were invaded by the reptilians, but there was already a reptilian species that was here, and they were driven underground, right? So we know that there was already this activity, but then there was this vampiric invasion. And I think that what happened was they ended up being two branches of the same family, the ruling class, and one of them became completely vampirized. And I think that it bled down into, what, no pun intended, down into the humans and even the animals. And so everything became genetically altered because they're trying to find a way around it, but they can't. And I'm telling you right now, we could be looking at the new world. if this one race of reptilians can't get it under control, then these other civilizations are going to have to come together. And I would say it's in the thousands of civilizations that live underground. Because in the Bible, it says those will be judged upon and within the earth. They know that they're there. They're there. And they become isolationists. It happens here. There's people that live in the outback of Australia. They're like feral people. There's a road that you're not supposed to go down because if you hit somebody, they say, keep going. Right? Because they could take you and they could do things to you, and this is in Australia where you live. So if that is the case up above, imagine what it is below. Now I know it's a long-winded question, but what are your thoughts on all of this? Give me your take on what you think of this with the vampires and everything that's going on.
When the vampires first came to my consciousness, and I have to backtrack to childhood because myself and others have had a number of dreams about what we would call vampires. Mm-hmm. And I remember those Christopher Lee Hammer film movies, which used to terrify me more than any other movies ever made. The Christopher Lee Hammer films would terrify me. And they did psychological studies with children. And they determined that of all the Hollywood type monsters, be they werewolves, vampires, Frankenstein, what have you, children seem to be most fearful towards vampires. And the psychological reasoning they came up with, well, it's probably because vampires look most human. So if they look most human and they have all these attributes, horrid behaviors, it's understandable why they should be more fearful of them. But I think, like you do, that it goes way back to the dawn of time, because even in the Filipino culture, there is a monster they refer to as an aswang, right, which is a vampiric entity. The depictions vary. Some of them are described as being having no lower half, just the torso on up, and wings and able to fly. Others are more humanoid in appearance, what have you. And when they first came to my consciousness, after a whole series of dreams about them, and I spoke to other people about this issue as well, at first I thought that perhaps in my subconscious and in my astral dreamscape, what I was perceiving as vampires was some kind of a metaphor for reptilians. Mm-hmm. But gradually over time, I began to realize that these vampires were a distinct species unto themselves. And if any of your viewers had watched that old TV show, and just like so many of them, the really good ones that drop a lot of truth bombs, they only last a season and a half at best. There was a TV show way back when called Kindred, the Embraced. And it was about these vampire clans in modern day society. And there was 4 or 5 different vampire clans. One was called the Nosferatu. They were these underground sewer cabin dwellers. The other elitist vampires looked down on them, called them sewer scum. Have you ever heard me talk about people being sewer scum or reptilian rapist or whatever being sewer scum? That's where I got it from, the TV show, Kindred the Embraced. Point being is that there were different clans. And some of these clans, by outward appearances, had a very mafioso, Cosa Nostra kind of aspect to them. Mm-hmm. And there is a real life parallel to that in the vamp world. There seems to be this vampiric clan that from all outward appearances seem to be like mafia. They dress up in suits, they have formal meetings, but they're vampires. And then there are counterparts to them that look for all the world like the Japanese Yakuza. Because as you know, the concept of vampires is global. Every society, going back to ancient times, they have a tradition of these vampiric human-looking beings. And the descriptions of these vamps can vary from a Yakuza-looking Japanese clan, mafioso-looking clan, even a Lost Boys-looking clan, that classic movie from back in the day, The Lost Boys. There are vamps that look like that. And what I've come to understand is they're not really a metaphor for reptilians. There may be some kind of connection between the two. I'm sure at some level they're aware of each other's existence. But as far as their existence, I believe they represent a distinct species here on Earth, and probably alternate realities, other worlds. There's probably parallels, and I believe this vampiric DNA is much sought after in the deep black special access program realm, just as they seek out those with Rh negative reptilian bloodlines, dogman type DNA, Sasquatch DNA. I'm sure at some level they're aware of the existence of these beings. And the people that I've spoken to, what they describe is, it seems to them, at first they thought maybe what they're experiencing in the dream state are astral experiences, alternate reality type experiences where, when we go to sleep, our spirit, what's the term that the ancient Comedians, Egyptians used, the Ba, the Ka, whatever the case may be, would leave our physical bodies while we slept and then go dimension hopping essentially into other realms, even other alternate realities. So there was some degree of a comfort factor when these people would go into the dream state, wind up in what they thought was an alternate reality, encounter these vampiric dreams of various stripes, and then they'd come back from the experience, they'd wake up in the morning and, well, I'm glad that's an alternate reality. I'm glad that's just a dream. I've always wondered, well, if they seem to exist in an alternate reality, why wouldn't they exist here, right?
Mhm.
And the cohesion, the organization, the society that they've created, sub rosa, I think that over time, that has started to come up into our surface world and manifest in a variety of ways. There used to be big taboos about blood drinking and that kind of thing. But going forward, progressing forward, because of this malign influence from Hollywood and the media and what have you, we've been bombarded with those kinds of images and those kinds of depictions of vampiric type dreams. We see this all the time in videos and music videos, especially of these vampiric entities. So I do believe that they exist, certainly in alternate realities, in all likelihood our own. And I think that, speaking, from with the other people that I've discussed this with, their greatest fear, uncertainty, relates to the fact that, well, if these vampiric entities exist in other realities, other realms, and they seem to be so well organized, right? Why wouldn't they be here? And so there's a fudge factor. Are these people really describing alternate reality experiences? And when I mean alternate reality, these are not just dreams where you have like a lightning sequence of juxtaposed images. None of them have any connection to any of the other images that we're seeing in the dreamscape. These are scenarios where you are at some place. Time is passing excruciatingly slowly.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is sometimes when we're in that state, we're in some kind of vampiric realm. It could be we innately feel that it's underground, or it could be on the surface. Some of these vampires seem to be able, like in the Blade movies, they could be daywalkers. Sunlight doesn't seem to have a negative effect on them. And so there seems to be these societies at work, and they're well organized, and they seem to interlink with our society. The stories that you've shared on your show about New Orleans, it makes me never want to go there, right?
Yeah.
Mardi Gras or no
Yeah.
Mardi Gras. But these stories are so pervasive throughout history of these vampiric type beings, and the stories that you shared in the recent past about Eastern Europe, the Eastern Europe intelligence agencies and the Warsaw Pact era seem to be aware of them, which absolutely makes sense, because the Eastern Bloc and the old USSR were so ahead of us being the West, as far as paranormal, psychic research, what have you, is concerned. Over here, We had these generally kind of low-budgeted operations, Stanford Research Institute, Project Stargate, and you compare it to what they did in the Soviet Union, where they actively sought out people. I have people I've had on my show. For some reason, the Croatians seem to be extremely psychic people. And they tell me, living in the old country, the former Yugoslavia before it was Balkanized, the intel agencies in the East Bloc would be after them, would be using them in what we would call my lab project people operations. So over there, they don't have this stigma of, I'm talking about the former Eastern Bloc, currently Eastern Europe, Eurasia, what have you. They don't have this stigma or this paradigmatic thinking where they have to kind of shuck their disbelief for a moment and say, okay, maybe there's something to this. They know it's real.
Yeah.
They know vampires are real. They know werewolves are real. And what they've done is they seem to have weaponized that DNA, because DNA is the currency of the universe. Every advanced civilization manipulates with genetics. So, I don't know if I answered your question, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
No, it's eye-opening, and I'll say something about this. The Eastern Bloc, we're talking about Poland, Latvia, Serbia, Croatia, the Serbo-Croatic, Serbia, Croatia, Kosovo, Macedonia. That was former Yugoslavia, those particular countries. But you had Latvia in the Baltic. Now, some people get confused. The Baltic is not the Balkans. The Baltic is by the Baltic Sea. And you're talking about Estonia, Latvia, Belarus, and Ukraine, Lithuania. Don't forget about Lithuania, Estonia, whatever. All of those countries, they were further north, and the Balkans is down south. Macedonia is like north of Greece. And just Macedonia? Just so people understand, it is the equivalent of Austria. There's Germany, Austria, then Italy. It's one of those in-between countries. That's where Alexander the Great was from. So Macedonia is really a mixture of Northern Greek and Southern Yugoslav, basically Slavic. It's an in-between country. The people there were known to be blonde-haired, fair-haired, whatever, and they didn't look like the Greeks. So the Greeks were like, "You're not one of us." And so Alexander says, "Well, I'm just gonna take over anyway, and we're gonna go conquer Persia. Buckle up, buckaroos. Here it goes." But so is Belgium. Belgium is one of those in-between countries. It's in between the Dutch, which is the Netherlands, France, and Germany, and they speak 3 languages. They don't have a Belgian language. So people are like, well, what do they speak in Belgium? They speak Dutch, French, and German. So that's those in-between countries. They're connecting countries is what I would call them. But the Soviet bloc, right? You have the Baltic countries we just named, and then the Balkans down in the south. But in between that, you had Bulgaria, you had Romania, and you had Hungary, right? And then you had Czech and Slovak, which is Slovakia. Those are actually 2 different countries. Then Slovenia, and then you had these sort of countries that were really their own, like Wallachia, whatever, and they became part of a bigger whole. Like that was it was its own country at one time. Now it's part of Romania, and has been for a long time. But the Soviet Union, which is really Russia and all of their satellites, because they took over all those countries, especially after the war. And Poland was one of their big prizes. And Poland was an expansionist too. They were not innocent. They had expansionist designs. And they had skirmished with Russia and Germany because they wanted to expand. And so Germany and Russia both looked at them as a threat. So there you have the Eastern Bloc. Now Now East Germany after World War II became a big part of the Eastern Bloc. And in fact, it was their prize, their crown jewel. To conquer Germany was a big deal for these families too, because they wanted this. And this goes back to the boyars. People don't understand what that is. I don't have time on this show to sit here and go over an entire history lesson, but to suffice it to say that it was something that they had wanted for a long time. The unification of Germany happened over many wars between Austria and the Prussians. They murdered each other to try to take control. There was Saxony, Luxembourg, Hesse, all these different regions, and they became Germany. Germany is not an old country, but those different principalities of Germany are very old. Switzerland is also German. People don't realize that, but they became their own country through neutrality And yeah, somebody said East Germany had the best economy. Well, yeah, because the Germans are one of the smartest people on earth, along with the Japanese. People who don't want to hear that, well, too bad. That's the truth. And here at PRT, we don't mix words, or we're not going to lie. We're going to tell you what's what. What you were talking about the Ozwing, I want to get into real quick about that, James, because you hit on that. Now, the Ozwing, I have gotten multiple stories of that. I think I almost have enough to do an entire show on that. There have been stories. There was a division of Rangers who were tasked with driving out the Muslim insurgents in the north of the Philippines, and they have documented a documented case of the Ozwing killing one of their unit members. It is a vampiric entity, and we know that vampires have been around at least since before, going all the way back to at least till the time of Solomon, the son of David, in the Bible. Now, Solomon, in the Key of Solomon, the Song of Solomon, all these different versions of the stories, it was a vampire that got him all hemmed up because he was attacking one of his servant's sons, and he was drinking blood from his foot at night.
Orneus.
And so he got all of the demons and jinn kind of hemmed up. They were aggravated because, hey, now we're getting called into the principal's office because of you and your nocturnal proclivities. And so there was a problem there between them and the vampires, because the vampires were the ones that got them caught because of their need to prey upon humans in a physical form. There's another story that's going to be in my book, folks, and it's about a vampire in Austria. It's not going to be talked about on the show, but it's going to be in my book. And if you go and you buy the book, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a interesting story about when the Habsburg Empire defeated the Ottomans and took over Serbia. And that land, when they took it over, they saw some things the Austrian officers were not prepared for. They were like, what is this? These rituals that they're doing in these villages when someone dies is bizarre. Well, it was because there were vampires.
Just please keep talking, Josh. I just got to grab something real back. Okay,
that's fine. So what they did was they went into these principality of what was Serbia at that time, and it once belonged to the Ottomans. And when they conquered it, they had to deal with these people who were willing to conform to a degree, but they're like, look, we have certain rituals we have to do. They wanted them to move away from being Islamic and be Christian. And they were willing to do that for the most part. A lot of them were Christian, but they had certain rites that they were supposed to abide by. And the Austrians were like, no, you have to bury your dead. You can't butcher them up and then, expect them to. But they were like, we have to do this. We have to stab them in the heart. We have to burn them, chop their heads off. And they're like, this is ridiculous. But it was what they had to do. And the reason they had to do it was very simple. Hang on one second. Okay. So they had to do this because these people were coming back. And these Austrian officers were confronted with the reality that these people didn't appear to be rotting away like a normal corpse. Now, if a corpse is in the ground for a month, it should look a certain way. And fresh blood shouldn't come spewing out of them when they are impaled. But they witnessed this. So it's a whole thing, and this brought it into focus in the West. They were like, look, these stories that we've heard of over in the East, this is really happening. This is not no joke. Now, this was back in I think it was the early 1800s or something like that. And it was toward the end of the really bad wars between the Ottomans and the Austro-Hungarians. They had fought so much against one another. At one point, there was a peace accord, and believe this, the Ottomans were willing to do a joint venture with their hated rivals, which actually is weird. It led into them being allies during World War I. Not so much Germany. It was actually through the Austrians, because you remember Austro-Hungary, that empire, the Ottoman Empire, and then the newly arrived German Empire joined forces to take on the Triple Entente, as they called it, to take on the Allies. And of course, Germany pulled all the weight because the Austro-Hungarian Empire was on its last leg, and so were the Ottomans, and the Germans were like, I think we made a big mistake, even though they were probably going to win the war until until the Americans joined in. And somebody said my mic is way louder. Let me move my thing back a little bit. He said I have to.
They said that James's mic
Oh,
is much louder.
James's
Yeah.
mic. Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was me. So, anyways, I read that incorrectly. But the thing is, you have to realize something. These weird, alliances. A lot of this came about because sounds like you got a big dog there. These alliances came about. A lot of it was something that was aligned for them. It wasn't them that made these decisions. I believe that there were forces that were behind the scenes making this happen. And I think that we have to, he's got his dog, but I think that we have to look at like what we're looking at in the terms of like, we're just living in this simulation. And I had somebody tell me this, and this is important, somebody that I'm going to be interviewing soon or possibly telling their story. And he said something very interesting. He said that this is a total simulation. I don't know what I believe 100% one way or another, but if this simulation were to fall, okay, think about this. And it was kind of along the lines of what he was talking about. You would see the real reality, and it would be a nightmare. And at some point, this reality, this matrix is going to break, whether you do it for yourself or God does it for us. It's going to fall, and we are going to see the real reality. Now, how many people are ready for that? And what James is referring to now, this is important too. Whenever James said that, he goes into this dreamlike state, and you see these alternate realities. You go through these portals, whatever, however you want to word it, folks. One of two things is happening there. You're going into these altered states of being. We know that. We've talked a lot about dreams and how they're not really dreams. We go into these altered states, right? And then you start to see another version of a reality. That could be one thing, and it's sometimes it translates very well to our world. But the second thing I'm going to say about this, sometimes it doesn't. And you think, this is so bizarre and so warped and so weird. How could that have been anything but my mind just fragmented, clearing out space like a computer, right? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if you go onto the astral plane and you go beyond the astral plane, and because you go there first, and then you go into the fourth, fifth density, what you're going to come across, different doorways, different places, and you're going to, and listen to what I'm going to tell you, folks, you're going into these alternate spaces. It doesn't translate from the fourth or fifth density into the third. So when you come back, you have all this information, but you can't disseminate it to anyone because you can't explain to them why you were looking like a giant tomato and rolling down the street, people were taking bites out of you. It doesn't make any sense. You're just like, this has just got to be some kind of stress or anxiety. No, these are alternate realities that you can't fathom. So when you come back, that's what your brain is really good at taking things and trying to formulate it into something that you will understand. The higher consciousness is grasping it. The lower consciousness is not. So when you're returning from those places, your mind takes back over for the spirit, and the spirit is giving it the information, but the processor is not fast enough, Yeah. You can't, so you don't know. You're trying to explain to somebody. I have been places where I can't explain to you what the hell it was, because if I told you, you wouldn't understand it. I can't understand it. And at the time, I'm sitting there going like, oh, this makes sense. I get it now. And then you wake up and you're like, that doesn't make any sense, because how the heck can I be 10 different people at one time? It doesn't make any sense. It's absolutely like and then when what James said earlier, I want to explain that too. When he said about going from basically using hieroglyphs to using words and a more primitive form of communication like letters and things like that, that is also a form of control. Because communicating through words is actually the lowest form of communication that we actually have.
Yeah, it's pretty primitive.
It's very primitive, and people don't really grasp that because they're like, what? That's how we've always done things. And you're like, when you tell people, they're just like, brother, what's that? Brother. They don't understand it. They don't grasp it. But some of these places, let's just take Death Valley, what we were talking about earlier, or the caverns, the different places that they found near Carlsbad and over there in the Grand Canyon. They find hieroglyphs and smooth walls, and these hieroglyphs are all over these walls. And this is an ancient civilization that predates us 120,000 years maybe, and they were very, very, very advanced technologically. They had energy that gave light to these rooms that they didn't need. They didn't need to light up kerosene lanterns or any of this. So why would an advanced civilization need hieroglyphs when we are taught the opposite of what is true? Remember I said about opposite day? They say, well, the ancient Egyptians and Sumerians and all these people use these symbols, and that's a primitive form of communication. No, because that one symbol can tell an entire story if you know how to decipher it. And so those symbols, which we can't understand or decipher because it's no language that exists in our world, that tells you everything you need to know right there, but you can't read it. You can't understand it. See, that's the problem. And so when he talks about that being like the higher, form, he's absolutely right. Because if you could draw a picture and put it in someone's mind, and then they could watch it come to life, animated through their own mindscape, you could tell the entire history of the world with one thought.
Yeah.
You could write all the books and you could stack them to the ceiling, 100 miles long and as tall as the Empire State Building. And if you read every book, you still wouldn't grasp everything that needs to be done. When all you need to do is download into your brain one picture.
Yeah, like an instant exchange of information.
Exactly.
Is the fastest form of communication, I think.
And your spirit can absolutely facilitate that. But we here in this universe, in this reality, have been dumbed down. James, you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's a plantation and we're the slaves. And we are forms of energy, and they're farming and harvesting us. That's what it is. And it's a very vampiric system. And we have an innate fear of our masters, which is you're born into that fear. That's why children are afraid of these vampires, because they unalive you. And so children are born with a natural fear of that. You're also born with natural fears of spiders and snakes. Some people aren't, but most people are, because they can unalive you because they're venomous. Not always poisonous, but they're all venomous to a degree. So people don't really grasp what we're talking about. It's like it's over their train of thought. But folks, you need to get on board with what we're trying to tell you. We're not trying to change your belief system completely. We're just asking you to look up, go do the research yourself. You don't have to take mine or James or Anthony's word for it. This is the real reality that we're talking about. The Matrix is where we're at, because they put us in a world where we're comfortable. I have a ranch. And I can tell you from raising animals my whole life, off and on, you want them to be comfortable. You want the animals to feel good. You want them to be happy, because then they'll be productive. The chickens will lay eggs, right? But in the end, there are some things that people don't grasp, because some animals are made not to be pets. Do you see what I'm saying? We are those. We are not pets. Some are, because they choose to willingly serve the master so they won't be harvested. That's my take on that. And I know it's a very scary but that's what I'm seeing. And I'm glad that, James, you brought that up, because, when you say the things you say, my head starts to turn, spin. Fred Denny, it's a prison planet. I mean, this is the truth. And if you think that this isn't the equivalent of Australia from England, think again. They've been dumping us here for a long time. It's just that this is a good harvesting ground now. This is a very backwater and off the beaten path place where there's lawlessness. That's why Christ came. And I'm not referring to Jesus coming in the way of like, okay, I'm going to do my Father's. I'm talking about the absolute Father of all things, the creator of all things, not the demiurge that we've discussed before. I'm talking about God, the true God. That's his son, not the version that people have painted. And his whole purpose was to bring you out of this. He gives you a way, but it's up to you. You either take it or you don't. accepting the offer that you're given by the elites is absolute death. Your body will be used as whatever, and then discarded, and your soul will be reconstituted. It's just the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an energy vessel to them. And of course, we know that energy cannot be destroyed. It's only changed. And they change it into something that they want. Yeah, which is food.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So, James, you did a lot of research in the Southern California area. We've talked about that before. And that's where you really started to come across like these examples of something that was not human, if I should say that. I don't know how you want to word it. I mean, you know.
Well, you talked earlier about Death Valley. One of the original MyLabs that went public was Diane Johnson. She was a friend of mine. I don't even know if she's still on this side of the veil. She could have passed away by now. But she had an experience where she was abducted by reptilians and was taken to an underground lair, which she intuitively felt was beneath Death Valley. And she was brought before a reptilian leader. And get this, the reptilian leader was wearing a Middle Kingdom headdress that you would have found in ancient Egypt, right?
Yeah.
With the serpent on top and all that. And the entity was talking to her telepathically and kind of gave her a data dump and said, a long time ago, your people worshipped as gods, and we've had some role, some degree of, let's say, handling or manipulation of your species, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And while she was down there, she actually saw a clutch of eggs. At least this species of reptilians, I'm not saying all of them are like that, but
Yeah.
at least this particular variant of them were egg layers. And she said, because by that point she'd had a lot of negative reptilian experiences. She lived in the high desert of Southern California, Ridgecrest, China Lake, in Yoker, in that area, is a notorious place for ETs, reptilians, and deep black military. And when she looked down and saw this clutch of eggs in this reptilian lair, she said she wanted to take an axe to them, just wipe them all out, all the eggs, right? But anyway, I thought it was interesting that you should bring up the Death Valley aspect of it. And it goes back to what we've talked about before in our discussions in the past, the notion that there are these civilizations, varying degrees of sophistication, living in the cavern systems beneath the planet. Michael Mott talked about this. We have the Shaver mysteries way back when. There was an understanding amongst the people in the old days that there are life forms, there are beings, there are civilizations that come up occasionally from the cavern systems beneath the surface. They come up and they mess with humans, sometimes abduct them and take them underground. We saw this in the H.G. Wells classic, The Time Machine, where the Eloi, this really pacified, almost modern version of humanity, right? Completely pacified, completely weak. And these beings, these Morlocks, whatever they were called, would come up at nighttime onto the surface and just take away these Eloi for consumption purposes underground. So H.G. Wells was plugged into some kind of information because my mentor, the late, great Barbara Bartley, and others were satisfied that this is going into some really dark, deep areas, but we're satisfied there are what Barbara Bartley referred to as processing plants, processing centers in these underground cavern systems where the reptilians essentially process human beings as a food source and other types of, let's say, vital extraction purposes. I've had David Eckhart on my show, and he's been taken underground, and he's seen this himself. So, we must realize that we are not at the top of the food chain. And about the vampires you talked about earlier, interesting story related to an individual I'm sure you're familiar with, the late unlamented Colonel Edward Lansdale, who started out in the Army Air Forces in World War II. Towards the tail end, he was in the Philippines, and he was working with a Filipino Army counterpart, interrogating and torturing captured Japanese to find out where Yamashita's gold was, right? A whole nother story. But he was tasked to either suppress or perhaps create an insurgency, what was known as the Hukbalahap insurgency in the southern part of the Philippines, Mindanao, places like that, because the CIA, the predecessor OSS and then the CIA, wanted to install someone named Ramon Magsaysay as president of the Philippines, as this compliant puppet of theirs, basically. And so what they did, and I don't know whether it's taking advantage of the superstitions of the local people or if they were really in cahoots with a vampire or vampires. But let me explain the backstory. Edward Lansdale, who some people considered to be one of the three tramps that were photographed in the wake of the JFK assassination at Dealey Plaza, L. Fletcher Prouty insists one of the three tramps photographed was Edward Lansdale, right? Anyway, and Edward Lansdale also was the real life model for the book, The Quiet American. That was about the early days of the American intervention in Vietnam. But anyway, what Lansdale did was he captured some hapless Filipino guy or guys, put puncture wounds in their neck, suspended them upside down so they bled out.
And they scared that,
Yes, and then put out this meme that the Asawang were loose and were killing people. Now, one way to look at that, okay, it was a psyop playing on the fears of the Filipinos in that region, that they're in a place that is run by vampires, so maybe they should move out and allow the Philippine military and constabulary and really the Americans to move in. But what if they were at some level in cahoots with one of these vampires, Asawang, who was actually on the payroll, so to speak, and went out on behalf of the Americans and the Philippine military working for the Americans to go out and do that? Just what's the term when someone is drained of blood?
exsanguination.
Exsanguination, exactly. Exsanguinate this poor hapless victim and then scare the hell out of the natives, which is exactly what happened, because it plays on these long-standing, centuries-old fears of vampires. Now, again, you flip a coin. Was it just Lansdale exploiting local supernatural lore, or was it deeper and darker than that? Because we know, if we fast forward to the present time, they're in cahoots with all kinds of weird critters these days in these underground bases and even in these surface level bases. So I don't put anything past them. And getting back to the vampires also, in the discussions I've had with people, sometimes when they're in this vampiric realm, whether it's in this reality or an alternate reality, sometimes they seem to be out of phase, not only from the visual spectrum of the vampires, but also energetically, the vampires can't seem to perceive them. So they can observe them, observe what seems to be, what by all outward appearances seem to be like a mafioso type meeting, except they're vampires, or a Japanese Yakuza meeting, except they're vampires. Sometimes the experiences are much more visceral and frightening, where the vampires are coming after these people that wind up in these places in the dream state. And sometimes it goes even deeper than that. In some of these alternate reality experiences, some of these people, for lack of a better term, they seem to be vampire slayers. And I didn't even want to really bring that up because I don't want to get anyone upset.
No, but, I mean, you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah, in some of these experiences, these people seem to be vamp slayers. And what's been described to me, and an endless source of frustration is, okay, I'm supposed to be a vamp slayer, but I wind up in these realms that are populated by these vamps. I don't have any weapons. I don't have any weapons that we've come to regard as anti-vamp weapons from all the movies and the lore. I don't even have a wooden stake. I don't have a crossbow. I don't even have a gun, right? And yet somehow I'm expected to deal, put down these vamps. And so, they tell me these stories like, I don't want to be there. I'm terrified. I'm frightened. They know I'm there. I can see them. They can see me. Now, I think what happens also is sometimes in the heat of the moment, these people, these would-be vamp slayers, forget they have metaphysical powers, if you will, and forget that they can
Human
do
side
things
of them.
from a telekinetic standpoint that may be to help them offset the lack of weaponry, let's say, right? Because they're caught up in the moment. These vamps are coming after me. I'm going to run, because often it's not what some of these people describe as, yeah, I'm supposed to be a vamp slayer, but in these realms and these experiences, often it's not. I'm spending my time running from them, fleeing from them, right? So there's that element too. So I want to impress upon the listeners and the viewers, these are not just dreams where you can just make yourself wake up from these things. You're there. Your consciousness is there. And time, whatever passes for time in that particular realm or realms, passes by excruciatingly slowly. You just can't like snap out of it, make yourself wake up and come back here to terra firma. It's like you're stuck there until this thing plays itself out. So I wanted to put it out there. And some of you may remember back in the day, the short-lived TV series, I think it was on Cinemax, I can't remember where, but it was Blade. There was one season where they took the Blade trilogy from Marvel, the Marvel Universe, and made a TV show out of it. And this Blade, this black guy playing Blade, he was not this jocular kind of guy. He was very hardcore, man of few words. He just had a job to do when he did it. There were these other bit characters in the TV series, what they called, I forget there was a name for them, but there was these, I wouldn't call them amateur vamp slayers, but what they would do is they would go out, slay vamps, and in the process, these vamps would, after they've been slain, they'd wind up in powder form, and then they'd scoop up the powder and sell it as a street drug. And then the powder would give these people momentary superpowers, right? But anyway, towards the last few episodes of that one and only season of Blade, they were getting into like royal family bloodlines, high finance capital. It was like, holy cow. And then abruptly that series was over, which is what they do sometimes. They'll do a bait and switch. They'll throw something out there, you get really into it, and then that's it. You don't see it anymore. So I just thought I'd throw it out there.
That happened with the Dark Crystal too. The Dark Crystal was one season, and I told everybody, I said, enjoy it while you can, because they're basically telling you we're the Gelflings.
Yeah.
They're like,
and this is it. There won't be a second season.
There won't be a second season because it hit the nail on the head, and you're not going to get a second season of it. So enjoy the thing while you can, because it's going to be gone. And they didn't get a second season. A lot of people, I said something on my page on Facebook the other day, and Paul Wallace mentioned Dark Crystal. I thought that was interesting because Paul Wallace is pretty well versed in a lot of this. It's so vast too. Let's touch on this. First of all, let's go back to the Oswing thing we were talking about. That would be the New People's Army Rebellion. That was the communist insurrectionists. Now, you had different things going on in the South. It was particularly, I think it was the Muslim insurrection, and then in the north of the Philippines. The Philippines, you can understand something.
The Moros in the South, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who are more genetically connected with the Polynesian peoples further south in the Pacific Islands, right? Than they are further, like the central part, the northern part of Filipinos. They're actually more genetically and look more like the people further south.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you had the communists who were doing what they did, but you got to understand something too. Philippines is just like a bunch of really closely connected islands. Really, I mean, it looks like a solid mass, but it's just a bunch of little.
It's an archipelago of 7,000 islands. Yeah,
it's unbelievable. Some of them are like peninsulas, some of them are islands, And so it's really just, it's a very swampy area. I think you hit the nail on the head about that. There was something there when they did what they did. And when you said the word tramp, somebody said tramp, because in our terminology now, a tramp is a woman that sleeps around. But back in those days, a tramp was a homeless guy.
Yeah, hobo, another
A hobo,
term.
a rail rider, or whatever, you know. So that's what you got. That's what you were looking at. That's what he's referring to as one of the three tramps. And I believe that too, because this guy was an operative for the CIA, who I don't know that they absolutely orchestrated it, because I think there was another power at play there. I think there was a country involved in it too. And I'm not going to say that on my show because I don't want to get canceled. So I could maybe go one day to Rumble and tell you everything about the Kennedy assassination, but I don't want to get, you know, but that's not what this episode's about. So you have that. So just so you know, you can look it up. It's the New People's Army Rebellion, the NPAR, whatever. Very interesting stuff, because there were two different task force that were created, these Rangers that were to fight the Muslims, and then the New People's Army Rebellion, the NPAR or whatever. And those people were always in the jungles fighting. And so they have some amazing stories about the things that they saw, not just the Oswing, but of these reptilians that would come out of these caves. Not to mention there's one in the middle of the Philippines. Well, I would say it would be South Central. There was a cave there, and I got to go back and look up my notes that I don't, you know, because I wasn't planning on talking about that tonight. But they found these emerald-eyed reptilian-like beings. And the same thing happened in Vietnam and in Laos. They found these caves, and there's even a picture going around of one of these reptilians that's kind of hiding behind a wall, and you can see him there. He's there. But it's very interesting, because it would be like the China would be like, you know, the main Asian country. Then you have this sort of Korean, Japanese, Taiwanese sort of Pacific Rim counter to China. And China kind of follows or mimics what they do, right? But you have this whole weird dynamic, and that they've all fought for these more jungled areas. Like the Philippines was a prize during World War II. So was Vietnam. So was all these other countries. The communists won, right? So then they dig their hooks into all these places. Well, they weren't interested in any of this. The China was not interested in the paranormal aspect like the Soviet Union was. Going back to that, and then bringing it all together, what it has to do with everything, the Soviet Union took the notes from the Germans. Now, they did capture, it's a myth when they say that we got all the scientists and they got all the notes. They got some of the scientists and all of the notes. We only got some scientists. We did not get nearly as much as they did. A lot of this stuff was in Eastern Germany, and the reason is because the Eastern Front had become the most important, and everything was kind of moving toward the east, because they were going to set up major bases in the east. And the Germans had spearheaded this movement, and it was part of all of that Madame Blavatsky, White Order of Thule, all that stuff, very esoteric, whatever, that had started actually in Russia and had kind of flittered into Germany, and then Germany had took hold. The swastika was being used on German planes before World War II, which is where Otto and Gregor Strasser got it, was from the East, and all of that esotericism. Hitler just co-opted it. It was not his creation. He didn't design it. He had nothing to do with any of it. He just took it over. And a lot of that came from the East. And so the Germans took the notes that they had from these organizations, and one of them being the Vril Society. And they went into the East looking for these objects, these artifacts, kind of like the Crusades, you know, like we're going to find this stuff. Russia picked up the mantle, and with the East Germans' participation, they continued this, and they went further and further into it. And we've talked about this on the show about them in Poland, that even to this day, like not now, but like I guess 10, 15 years ago, there was still a facility being used in Poland as a joint venture between like at least half a dozen different countries, trying to create these soldiers, these dogmen. And I think the United States was probably involved in that. And they were working alongside with the Russians and the Germans and, you know, these different countries that were doing this, Argentinians and whatever, because the world is not really divided the way you think it is. It's really divided along ley lines. I know that sounds crazy, but it's ethereal energy, and they use it because it's infinite. And then we fight over the scraps of a artificial world, which they created for us to live in, you know. And as long as we don't venture beyond that or go beyond the ice wall, we're fine. Don't go beyond what we're limited with, you know. And I think that what had happened was China went the opposite of the Soviets. They went so far into communism that they actually believed their own whatever you would call it, the early days. How do you say it? Like, you know, you're putting out your BS, but you start to believe in your own BS. I think that that's what they did. Whereas the Soviets knew that they were pumping out a bunch of BS for you huff that paint while we breathe clean air. And that's what they were doing. And if you read the book Animal Farm, you'll kind of see they were the pigs. They were the ones in charge. That's what the book is about. And they were dominating the people through this faux reality, keeping everybody subdued and keeping everybody under control while they benefited from it. And they were living, at least maybe not in the real reality, but adjacent to the real reality, where they could slip in and out of it. And they wanted more and more power so that they could control this matrix, because it is a pool of energy. And that's what it's all about. They want energy. And these puppeteers, if you will, they have tried to, you know, mask the fact that we are just lambs led to the slaughter and that you're not supposed to know these things. And when somebody becomes aware and becomes awake, well, there's a collective consciousness, folks. And the more people that become aware and become awake, and we all start to speak with one voice, guess what? You start to change things. And it's not as easy for these people to do what they've been doing. And it becomes, and they're not people, folks, trust me. And when people talk about the Nephilim, well, they were Nephilim, they're evil spirits. Yes, they're evil spirits, but it doesn't say that they won't inhabit a body. That's another thing people don't understand about these perfectly possessed, these people who are being, I think they're just evil puppets that come back to just create problems and chaos. They keep throwing them back into circulation. How many times do you think that one of these people from one of these big, powerful families has been here? You think this is their first rodeo? No, they'll come back and they'll come back. They've convinced you that it can't happen through religion. They've told you this is impossible. Don't believe this. And it's evil and it's wrong. Even though Jesus tells you over and over again, you die for lack of knowledge. How many times do you have to read that passage before you understand what he's saying? You will die for lack of knowledge because you don't know. And when you don't know that something is bad, you fall for it and it kills you. Do you understand? So these people, they keep coming back. These are literally the sons of the fallen, of the archons. And they continue to do what they do. Well, one of the things that I've said this before, aliens and demons, what is the difference? The difference is that a lot of aliens are demons, but not all demons are aliens. That's the difference. And you got to really, really, really think about it. And a vampire can be multiple things. That's why I say it's a disease. Now, when you get to the Vril Society, they were in connection. They were in cahoots with a reptilian sort of branch. What they didn't understand was those Vril, the real Vril, are actually reptilians, and they're vampiric. And they don't just want your energy, they want your blood. Because as long as they are in this reality with us, that is their fuel. That's something that people don't understand. And I try to tell them, I said, you don't understand. And there was a woman that we had interviewed, James. She talked about being aboard a craft. I think she was taken to a hangar. Personally, that's my opinion. And I believe it was out in California, my opinion. And she saw this vampiric entity that was inside of a cube, that it was a clear cube, but with the lights changed, she could see it. It was like an ultraviolet, cube, which kept it under control, right? These aliens told her, they said, don't get too close to it because it'll infect your mind. And they told her, this species is capable of wiping out the entire world. And they could do it very quickly. They are subdued, though, by some of their peers, and then those that you call like the vamp slayers, those people that have that innate ability to kill them. One of the things that kills them, and I'm going to tell you this is absolute truth, if you're in that other realm and you're having problems, is a white light. I know that sounds very simplistic, but it's the truth. And it comes from your inner middle chakra, and it can literally vaporize these things. Now, we are not supposed to go around giving the second death, but it is within your power to do so. You've been told Jesus always just cast out. He didn't kill, because he was a perfect being. We are not perfect beings, and we don't have the power of Jesus to stop them from doing what they do. Sometimes you have to unalive creatures, entities, whatever. We've heard about this on the show, people having to shoot these things and do these things. Let me say this. I'll put a disclaimer on here. Do not shoot a human, okay? Do not burn a human, okay? This is not something I'm telling you to do, but if you are in that dream state and you become aware, you're lucidly dreaming, you know that this is like, hey, you can use that God light, that energy that's within all of us, that spark and life and breath of God, you can use that to destroy them. Because you're living in this matrix that they have created, which is really just, like I said, a prison. And when you come out of your body, you end up going to places where you're not really supposed to be. Says who? Says the powers that be. Don't do it. Rebellion is witchcraft. Rebellion against who? Right? Because the king uses that to keep you in line. And these kings, even they, the emperors of this world, are still beholden to these other powerful entities, i.e. vampiric reptilians. The blood drinking, how long has that been going on? A long time, longer than we've been around. But I don't think it initially started that way. I think they came in, infiltrated like a fifth column during the reptilian invasion around the time of the Sumerian kings. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but it kind of goes back to that point right there. I think that's where it was, and I think that's when you saw a vast leaving of this surface and going underground. I think it happened 100,000 to 200,000 years ago, but I think that this has happened again and again and again. All of these different things are happening, and they cycle back and forth, and then there are 2 billion years worth of Earth history, right? And if 4 of the yugas come out to 4,320,000 years, which according to the Vedas, that's in one of the oldest, records we have, comes from the Tamil culture, which predates Sanskrit. And of course, they said that this has happened over and over and over again. So you're talking about thousands of cycles, that we've been in, and it just keeps happening. So for a race of being to be around for 80,000 years and then vanish is really nothing. And your friend going under the earth in the Death Valley area to find reptilians, they weren't the original inhabitants of that city. The Nordics were, but the Nordics died. And I think what happened to them, they lost part of their kingdom, not all of it, but I think part of it was subdued. And I think it was through, and I'm going to say this is going to sound weird, but I think they killed them. They gassed them. And I think it was that they were living above a hostile neighbor. Now, if you go to the Hadith of the Quran, it talks about the jinn, and they have neighbors. And they don't get along with them. They fight, So their neighbors, who are their neighbors? It doesn't really go into these explanations, but we know that there was a race of beings before them called the Jan. Not the jinn, the Jan. And if you go back further enough, there was somebody before them and somebody before them and beyond, and it just keeps going on and on and on throughout the eons. And so now we are here and we think we're at the height of technology, but we're not. We really aren't. And we're basically playing with half a deck and we're trying to win. And there's no winning this. You can't do it physically at all. You can barely do it mentally. You can barely keep up with the elites, much less the people that are controlling them, and then the beings that are in charge of them. So you have to do it spiritually. But what we're not grasping is that we are made to be a human battery, and it can be for good or evil. It's your choice. But evil always, you will end up in the belly of something. That's my point, about all of this. And James, what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree? I mean, what do you think is going on, like with the battles within the earth that we know that are happening around us, and a lot of it's being fought spiritually, and it's coming out into our physical realm? What do you think of this? And what role do these reptilian overlords, as you call them, I mean, what role are they pulling all of the strings, or are they still fighting with themselves? Are they being vampirized? What's going on here? What is your take?
There seems to be conflict amongst the various reptilian
Oh man.
groups. I've spoken to people who have a lot of information about this, and they describe how certain more warlike, or at any rate more powerful reptilian groups tend to subjugate other reptilian groups underground that are not as strong as them. And this is something that we see on the surface all the time. So that's not unusual in and of itself. And there's a lot of cosmic vassalage at work, a lot of slavery, for lack of a better term. David Eckhart talks about this, where he'd been taken many times into this reptilian realm underground, and he sees these different reptilians, not quite the ruling elite down there, but other reptilians that seem to be more of a worker class, and other beings that are not reptilian that seem to be enslaved, as well as humans down there. So there's definitely a hierarchical caste system at work, and I believe the reptilians are the ones that bequeath this caste system upon us. We have this extreme version of that with India and the Hindus and the Untouchables and what have you, but it's reflected throughout society. The upper classes, middle classes. England for so long was stratified in this way. You had the ruling elite bloodlines, what have you. So there seems to be this conflict underground where the stronger, more aggressive, powerful reptilian clans, if you will, lord it over, subjugate other groups. So that is going on. And I believe that there does seem to be some conflict on the surface where certain hybridized bloodlines, because they're very hierarchical, no one wants to play second fiddle. Everyone wants to be the top dog. So you have these reptilian hybridized elements in the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, in Russia, in America, Anglo-Saxons, the English, etc. They all want to be the top dog. So there's some internecine conflict between them at times. In general, I believe they have a overarching agenda where they view us regular humans as chattel, as a food source, what have you. They've gotten to a point in time, and I think, again, cycling back to what I talked about earlier, we are once again on the cusp of these celestially driven cataclysms. So they're pulling out all the stops now. They're not even trying to conceal their depopulation agenda. They're quite open about it, but typically it goes right over the heads of most people. Paradoxically, ironically, they're spending too much time scrolling and looking at their scrying devices, these phones of theirs.
Scrying devices.
And I've always said,
Black Mirror.
what was found in the debris field at Roswell and other crash retrieval sites, and this ongoing liaison, deep black liaison between elements of the military industrial complex, secret societies, what have you, and, for lack of a better term, aliens, that technology they bequeath to us, we see it every day in the form of these digital devices. What should be a liberating kind of means to plug into the greater information field, for so many, these digital devices have become a trap. We are all just victims. I forget the line in that classic Eagles song, Hotel California, where we become victimized by the
check
technology.
in, but you never leave.
Yeah, that. And so, we're victims of this system, and you see how it affects people. it brings out the worst, most narcissistic elements within them. So many people out there filming themselves committing crimes, right?
Yeah.
It's like that
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
even make sense on a
World star.
It's a whole thing. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So point being is that what should be, when you zoom out, a means to an end, these digital devices helping us to become more in tune with spirit, more in tune with the universe. In the old days, mysticism and real science were two sides of the same coin. There was no division between the two.
Dividing.
Right? And you've had guests in the recent past talking about all these lost equations, all the work of Paul Dirac, and then I would go further and talk about Max Bohm and Planck and others. So much of their information, David Bohm is a great guy to plug into. He talks about the implicate order. There's so much information that has been eradicated. And so we're left with this reductionist model. Everything is broken down into atoms, particles, subparticles, what have you. It's a reductionist model. What we need to do is get back into what the Germans used to call the ether physics, right? Where everything around us, it makes up the medium of the ether, and we travel through the ether. We obtain information through the information field by plugging into the ether. But the way they've worked it out, because mathematicians have basically taken over physics, and this has been going on. And there's something to the notion that math is the language of the universe. I understand that. But it's gone so far into this left-brained, mathematical, logical Mr. Spock direction that we've completely lost touch with the spiritual dimension. Anyone who's had an out-of-body experience, and I've had many, will tell you straight up that we're more than just dross. We're more than just dense matter. There's something about us. And people always talk about that silver cord connection between our physical body and our astral body. Well, who's to say that's not part of the control system? Why should there be some kind of tether holding our spirit to our physical body? Well, why couldn't we be like a yogi if you want to spend 40 years, in that kind of a discipline, right? Why couldn't we just leave our body anytime we want, right? One of the best books I've ever read was The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramatma
I have
Yogananda. And he talks about all these different saints and all these different yogis who achieved all this mastery over physical matter, over even death itself, right? So if you look at what the human race has been relegated to, our telomeres have been shortened, our lifespans have been truncated 70, 80 years plus if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And that facilitates the whole recycling, reincarnational spin cycle. And also the mind swipe, where why shouldn't we come back and retain, if not all, at least some of our memories of our many past incarnations here on Earth and on other realms, other worlds. And that ties in also to what you talked about. We are the sum of all of our parts. Many of us, many of the people watching and listening to this right now, we've had incarnations on other worlds, in other realms. We were, for lack of a better term, aliens in some of these incarnations. So why shouldn't we be able to re-access, plug into that information field and bring back that know-how and that understanding to benefit us in this realm? So there's some kind of wall, there's some kind of like firewall, if you will, that's been set up. And I think part of our journey here is to bust through that. And I think we're making inroads in that direction. Now we see the inverse of that, right? With CERN and all these other things where they're openly saying, well, we're going to rip holes in the fabric of reality and get in contact with the old ones that...
well, let's bring Cthulhu to the party and let's see what happens.
That's right. So if they're openly talking about that, why can't any one of us, through some spiritual and meditative means, be able to reconnect firmly with divine source, right? But they set up all these roadblocks, they densify us in so many ways with the processed food, etc. So I think that many of us, you included, and your whole team there, we're boots on the ground. We're the sum of all of our parts. Many of us, and I don't think this conflicts with any form of religion or spiritual belief system. But I do believe that some of us have come here as boots in the ground. Many of us have had incarnations, existences in other realms, other worlds, in this cosmos, and in other dimensions. And for whatever reason, and I'm not just saying this like in whistling past the graveyard, variety, but it's possible that some of us decided to willingly get caught up in the reincarnational cycle here, just so we could be here now, boots on the ground, anchoring
Yeah.
higher frequencies,
Yeah.
making a difference. Look,
Yep.
somebody had to do it. Somebody, if you look back, World War II, the stay behind parties of Malaya, the Maquis in France, I mean, somebody had to be behind the lines. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I think that, without putting too fine of a gloss on it, many of us have chosen to be here now. And I've said this many times, it's like, to be with my family, my friends, my close friends. I'd come to a world a million times worse than this to help, to do what I can, right? And we got to be somewhere. Would we rather be sitting up on a cloud playing a harp, looking down, not my problem? Or we'd rather be boots on the ground, making a difference? For me, most definitely the latter.
So to unwrap some of what you're saying here, now one of the things I wanted to point out was that this is one of the things that I believe, this construct that we're living in, this, and here on the show, we've shown people how these beings exist, a right angle from a right angle. We've shown the tesseract, how these things interact. Let's start with this, and then we'll get into the numbers thing, right? Okay, so the AI, this is AI. I believe that they used us to create AI to create a prison for us. I know that sounds crazy, but time is a loop, folks. It really is. It is not a river.
Mhm.
It goes into like a lake, and then it kind of goes down and it goes back up. And people don't understand that. This is something that I've seen you were talking about out of body experiences. I've had these, and I believe that you are correct. We're not doing boots on the ground right now talking. When people go running around out in the woods and hitting things with sticks, great. Go ahead, do what you got to do. We do that too, but not like to the degree that those people are doing it. That's their whole shtick. That's great. Do what you got to do. But what we're talking about is the cerebral part of it that is, and not getting too far left. You're talking about the left brain. Yeah, you're just doing mathematics and whatever. And I believe that there is nothing that is actually that doesn't exist. Everything exists that has ever been thought of as fiction. It's actually part of a reality that's been discovered. Okay. To people from the 1600s, even the 1700s, electricity would have been a pipe dream, and explaining to them that you can harness that power of lightning from the clouds and you can put it into a bulb. That's going to be like, you are a witch. What are you talking about? Put him in the stockade. This man speaks blasphemy. He's an apostate, a heretic, whatever. They're not going to understand it. And you might as well talk to my cats and tell them, hey, or my dogs and tell them, but you're not going to get through them. They don't understand it. You can't teach them math. They don't know what they're talking about, what you're talking about. But the AI, I think it was an idea that was implanted by the others, whatever you want to call them. And then we created it. We brought it into existence because in this world, they actually need us as a conduit, as a connection. What I mean is that they have to be able to harness us. They have to be able to control us. And then they have to put the idea in your mind. Now, if it didn't exist already, you wouldn't find it. So there really is no fiction. Everything is something that is somewhere, exists in that way, right? No matter how abstract and right-brained it seems to be, the creation of something is something that's already there within this matrix, or you wouldn't have it. I'm telling you the truth, right? So whatever you can come up with, whatever you can conjure up in your mind really is part of the real reality. You're getting pieces of it, but what it is you're riding that particular wavelength. It's all vibrations and it's all, energy. So you're tapping into that particular part of the matrix and you're seeing it. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So mathematics becomes all encompassing and all important because that is what's propping up this matrix. So they have to move in that direction. They have to push everybody to say, hey, you have to be over here doing XYZ, because if you're not, then you are not part of our reality and you have drifted too far off into your right brain, which is where the true creation exists. Now, and Jesus always says, look within for the kingdom of God, not to look out there, because that's not where it exists, because it's all right here. It's all here. This is where it's at, right? I had Ron Moorhead on the show, and one of the things he talked about was how your heart has its own mind. I know that sounds weird. It's almost like a, and he, of course, is a very big believer in that Bigfoot is more of a metaphysical phantom, something. People don't really like it because it's not as sexy of an idea, but the truth is the truth. It's what these things are. And they have the ability to move in and out of our reality. But when you start to look at it with the right lens, you start to see that is the real reality. These beings, actually these subnatured beings, I say subnatured because they're not really part of our natural world. Just like we're not really a part of their natural world when we're in this state. We have to go into another form of energy to become a part of their world, and this vice versa. But we can connect and be a part of that world, just like they can connect and be a part of ours. We are all connected to all of these realms. And what you're talking about, when people ask me, this is very interesting, James, what you just said. I've never heard you say that before, but I can tell you this. When people ask me, they said, where do you think you're going to go when you die? Because I have all these zealots that come at me, Christian, Muslim, whatever. And they're like, and then even some Buddhists had challenged me, well, you're going to have bad karma. You're going to do that. Listen, what I'm going to tell you right now. I don't do anything thinking about the reward of heaven. And I don't do anything thinking about the punishment of hell. What I do is what I think is correct. And I do always what I think is right. And I know that I will go to where I need to be. Because if you do that, and I've accepted Christ, so I'm not worried. I got the bases covered. If you think for a minute that I'm wasting every minute of my life psychoanalyzing and thinking about critics and whatever the hell else that's going on, you're wrong. And if you think I think importantly of people who make fun of them back, it's become sport to me. So it really means nothing to me. This is nothing, and this planet is not important. It's part of a battlefield that's part of a bigger whole of a war. And if you don't understand that, when Jesus tells you there's spiritual warfare around you at all times, he's talking about an intergalactic war that is going on and has been for eons. Be eons for us, but not for them. Because like you said, that it's a different time is not like it is here. When they say you're going to go get punished forever, you're going to another realm where there really is no time. So to you, with your human mind, which you're going to be put in, which really sucks, and you're going to be cubed. Okay, go look that up. You know what that is. You're going to punish. They're going to punish you in this way, right? But who is doing the punishing, right? It is something that you have accepted in an actual astral contract that you have no memory of now because you have amnesia. And it's not just an amnesia like I have amnesia of who I was. You have amnesia who you are. James has amnesia. I'm talking about a collective consciousness that's been wiped. And every time it's like what is that thing called where you put it into your computer?
Like a USB stick?
Like a USB stick, yeah. It's like that thing is just changed out and you become someone else. And they plug you in. And then there are those who choose to come back into this matrix because they're trying to help you learn and get out. That's what James is talking about. Mm-hmm. It's a higher self that you tap into. I don't know how many people have been really drunk or been high on mushrooms or taken something, smoking marijuana, whatever it is you do. I'm not judging. I'm just saying if you've done that, no matter how messed up you get, now maybe salvia might be a whole nother. I don't know about salvia, might go too far. But if you take that, there's still something there that's sober. You can almost look down on yourself and you're like, wow, you are really messed up, dude. Because something there does not become inebriated. The higher self does not partake of the inebriation. It is a very physical thing that affects your mental. And what it does is the spirit never becomes inebriated. The spirit, it just clogs up the connection between the mind and the spirit. Mm-hmm. That's what an LSD actually just kind of flips a switch and you start to see things from another reality. In other words, it's already there. You're just tapping into it. That's it. It stops this reality for a minute and it bleeds into another reality. And so you think, wow, I am seeing something amazing. Really, you're not. You're just seeing what the real is. I had a guy on the show the other night, James, and he was talking about a vampire incident. It was on Monday. We have a call-in show on Mondays, and people come in and they tell their stories. And his story, people were having trouble following it, but me, it was simple to me because he took a 8-second shot of absinthe. And then he began to see the people around him like they were vampires. Now, this happened to a guy at Denny's in, I think it was Florida or somewhere in the South. I got to go back and look. But this other guy had told us this, that he was seeing this couple that were arguing and they were vampires. And then they noticed him noticing them. And his friends who were on the same things that he was, except for one was sober. So there's your control right there. You had two that were not sober like him and then one that was, and none of them saw that. But he did, because he tapped into that wavelength and showed him the real reality. So temporarily, he was witnessing the true reality. And he was seeing these beings that have been parasitized. That is the key right there. People don't really understand because the parasite does what it does. If you take pictures from the Middle Ages, 14th century, 15th, 12th, doesn't matter. They have pictures of what looks like demons. Now, they drew these. Mm-hmm. Then you go and you look under a microscope at parasites, and they look the same. They look like demons. Why? Because that's what they are. That's what parasites are. And it takes your will and it destroys it and it turns it into its will. And parasitism is the name of the game. And what you're talking about, James, like how these different beings will take other parts of themselves, really, and parasitize them and create them into, think of like the tall grays versus the small grays. The tall grays engineered the small grays. For what? To interdimensionally travel and do the crap that they didn't want to do. Very simple. And if they want to act up and get out of control, well, you can just pump them across the room because they're only this tall. So what does it matter? When they created or engineered some of us, do you think that that's what they did? They said, hey, let's make a race of giants like us that get out of control and we can't, then there's a problem. No, they're going to make you about this tall. It's something that they can control. Just like imps are small demons. They've been engineered themselves. That's what they are. They can create too. Then they create smaller ones, and it just keeps going down onto the quantum level. And in the end, the small could be actually engineering the big. I remember the Transformers cartoon when I was a child, and somebody recently mocked me and said that I was living in the cartoon world, whatever. Maybe I learned something from that cartoon world, because I can tell you this. When Unicron, it was during the new Transformers, I didn't really like it as much, but because Optimus was dead and whatever. But Unicron, you see the guy that created him. Mm-hmm. He was like the ultimate bad guy in that universe. And after the movie, not these Michael Bay blow-up movies, but this cartoon movie, right? And it was after that it was the post-war, but that big war that they fought in the movie. The Decepticons were living on some planet. They were not doing their best, right? And they had Galvatron as a leader, whatever. They showed the creator of Unicron, and because they needed to retrieve something in his brain, the creator was this small little rat-like creature that actually created this humongous entity mm-hmm. who became a muncher of worlds. But ultimately, going downsizing, that would be creating, where you could control. And then the smaller one says, I want something bigger to control. And then it goes back, and then you meet somewhere in the middle, because time is a loop. And it makes sense when you stop and you look at these things and you're going like, this is crazy. Like, someone thought that up, right? But it's still part of a reality, because you wouldn't be able to tap into that.
Yeah, access idea through the collective consciousness. I believe that.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically controlling your own reality, and those people who created those influenced us as children. So you watch these shows, these movies, you read these books, Time Machine, like you're talking about, the H.G. Wells. you start to get a picture like, where did this come from? These people were not just thinking these things up out of their own mind, because some people who've never seen any of this stuff are still getting the same fragments of information. So what you're left with in the conclusion is that this has all been done before and it will be done again, because it says in the Bible, there's nothing new under the sun. And there isn't. And it keeps going. But there is a rhyme and a reason for us to learn these things and to try to understand it. And the main purpose of us to be here is to break out of this, to break the matrix, because we are not supposed to be here, folks.
Yes. Well, we're paradigm busters, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Tolkien saga, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was talking about Earth. He may have coached it in terms of Middle Earth. But what do we have here on our Earth? We have dwarves, imps, giants, and I would argue that there is such a thing as scale invariance. When people think of giants, they think in terms of 8, 15 feet tall, Kandahar giant. No, I'm thinking about big mountain-sized giants. I'm talking about, if you look at the Soho footage, the solar heliospheric, whatever it's called, the imagery system that focuses on the sun, and you see large planet-sized craft. And some of these are spherical and others are just irregularly shaped, but they're gigantic. And it just makes me wonder, how big are the denizens of that craft? Are they like our size, or are they like the size of Texas? Because everything is scale invariant. And if you look in our paleo-ancient past, to borrow a term from Dr. Joseph Farrell, the mollusks were huge. The sea scorpions were huge. Lloyd Pye talked about this, how for a long period of time, eons, we had like simple prokaryotes, single-celled organisms, and then whammo, seemingly overnight, our seas were filled with gigantic creatures that would make us flee for the shoreline if we were to see them today. Huge creatures, huge insects. Everything was scaled up big in the old days. And I think it's a direct result of the much higher, what's been demonized today, carbon content in those days. For whatever reason, not only was there probably more oxygen in our atmosphere, but a higher carbon content. What do greenhouse operators do? They get carbon canisters, they blast their greenhouses, they make everything grow bigger and faster. And yet we're supposed to believe that carbon is bad, right? But in the old days, everything was oversized. Why is that? And why is everything shrunken down to, when we look at someone like Shaquille O'Neal, oh, that guy's a giant. No, he's not. Not in the overall scheme of things.
No.
Right? He'd be puny compared. And I used to watch a show when I was a boy, when I was living in Corpus Christi, Texas. Some of
you lived in Corpus?
I lived in Corpus, lived in Kingsville, spent time in Brownsville, all those places, because my dad was in the Navy, Naval Air Station, Corpus Christi and Kingsville when I was a boy. And there was a show called, some of you old timers can remember this, Land of the Giants.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even remember
reruns of it.
Yeah, I don't even remember how it started out, but there was a group of people like us that somehow, I don't know if they went through a wormhole or whatever, but they wound up in another realm where everyone was gigantic. And then we have stories in our folklore, Gulliver's Travels, what have you. There were giants. There is a mountain here in Australia where, if you look at it, it looks like a huge Yowie / Sasquatch just sitting down, but it's a mountain, right? So, we're talking about scale invariant. The concept of ancient giant trees. I'm absolutely convinced that some of these things that we pass off as plateaus, mesas, they're nothing more than gigantic tree stumps. Because if you look at the features, the root system, everything else, they are exactly what you would see in a normal sized tree. But then when you scale it up, these things were gigantic. And it begs the question, who came along with a giant chainsaw,
Yeah.
sawed it off right there at the base, right? Some kind of civilization that had the means to do that. So much of our history, uh, we live in a realm where giants exist, where elves exist, where fae exist. These are not myths, they're not fables. They really exist. People with that third eye etheric vision can see them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have a gal on my show in a not too distant future who lives in Ireland, and she sees these beings all the time, giants, elves, what have you, because
Yeah.
she's got the etheric third eye vision. They're just out of phase of our visual spectrum for most of us, right? I'm kind of glad that I can't see into
Yeah,
that realm.
I can some, but I don't. I try to wall it off.
Yeah. I mean, there are times, like one time I was in between Twilight Zone stage, half asleep, half not,
Mhm.
and I saw 3 reptilians walk by the bedroom, and followed by a little dwarf-like entity. Right now, if I was wide awake, I wouldn't have seen that, but I was just in the right state of being where I was able
Where
to
were
perceive.
you? Where were you?
I was before when I was doing the long distance dating with my wife Kylie. I would take a cheap flight to Melbourne, and she lived in a suburb of Melbourne called Avondale, and the house she lived in was basically haunted. I mean, there were active portal entries in there where you could hear footsteps banging on the walls. I mean, it was that kind of a house, right? And so one night I was laying there freezing because it's so cold in Melbourne in the winter, and I just happened to be in the right frame of mind, state of being, where I see these 3 reptilians walk by and a small hooded, cloaked figure. Now, if I wasn't in that state, I wouldn't have perceived that. And there are certain pharmaceuticals. I think it's deliberate. I don't think it's inadvertent or an accident. But people get on these pharmaceuticals and they can see this stuff. And you talked about reptilians and what have you. It's well known within the community of people who've taken LSD and mushrooms that when people imbibe in LSD, sometimes they can not only see the reptilians overshadowing the host human, but they can see what would be invisible in most cases. But to them, they can see reptilians and other beings all over the place. They're there. They're coexisting with us. They're just out of phase of our reality, but the realities coexist. And I think as time goes on, the fundamental concepts are changing. Either we're able to perceive more, there's energy streaming in from the galactic core, which are enabling, facilitating all this. I think that the powers that be, the reptilian overlords and other negative parasitic beings, they're aware of these changes. And that's why they're pulling out all the stops now. They're putting everything in place through their hybrid plantation managers to set up this control grid and just shut everything down, reduce us, depopulate us. So whoever's left, they plug us in true Borg-like fashion into some kind of, Internet of Things or whatever, right? Just enough of us left over to operate the machines and the computers, but that's it, basically.
Power the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a scary thought. It's a scary reality that we are teeter-tottering and we're hanging in the balance. And people don't realize that the worst parts of every holy book on earth coming to an end of an age. It's not the end of the world. The world will be around and it will endure for another 2 billion years, but it's going to be the end of an age for sure. And there'll be a lot of unalived people. And a lot of people are going to be very just like, what the heck just happened? Because the war that's going on, there are always people that sit back on the sidelines and say, well, it's not my problem. It's not my problem. That evil person doing this or that, it's not my problem. Oh, well, they were a serial killer. He killed a bunch of people. And not my problem. They don't care. They're not interested in anything that they have to actually do that expends a little bit of energy, because they don't realize that energy is infinite. They think that it has to be something that they hoard or grab or whatever because they're mimicking the overlords, And so what people don't understand is you need to do these things because it not only helps the overall good, but it'll help you. right? It helps, in the overall greater scheme of things. And I cannot convince people. There are times where it's just so frustrating to me because I cannot seem to get through to them to make them see that my battle is your battle. I don't mean going out and fighting on the internet with douchebags. What I'm talking about is like the battle between light and dark,
Spiritual battle,
the spiritual war that is going on, and every bit of good that we put into this, it adds to it. Just as if we don't do anything and the dam breaks, not one single raindrop thinks it's responsible for the flood. They're like, well, I'm just one raindrop. Well, there was a billion of you that did nothing. And you sat back and watched. It always happens in every world. There's a handful of people that do the fighting. And then billions benefit from it. And eventually that story fades away and it just becomes a myth or a legend. And then those people are thought of as just like cartoons. And then they become cartoons. And then it becomes a big joke. And then the dummies that I was talking about on the internet make big jokes about it because they don't grasp it. They don't realize it. They don't live in the real reality. They live in the construct reality. And they have no way to reach that other side because their higher self has already been taken over by this, this evil collective consciousness that fights against the real reality, good collective consciousness. Because, and this is very important, Jesus, when he says that my father is not your father, and he laughs at the Pharisees, he's like, your father is Shaitan, and you're of his synagogue. He's like, he tells them, he's like, you're wrong. He's like, my father is something you can't comprehend. I don't know who you're worshiping or what you're doing. He basically tells them that. He says it in the mainstream Bible. He says it in the Catholic Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, and all the Gnostics. He basically tells you right there over and over again that this is not the true. I don't know what you're doing. You're worshiping this, the one that created this matrix. And they say, who is this? He says, it's Satan. He just very simply, he says it. He's like, that Satan is the god of this world. But if you go outside of this world, he's not the god. He's not. He's only the god of this world. Why do you think these vampires, these reptilians, and their monkey men and their dog men and all the other crap that they produce, why do you think that they're all bowing down to this? Why? Because that is their god. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it Baphomet. You can call it any one of these gods that these people are worshiping. Moloch, Baal Haman, they're all the same guy. They're just different names. Now, get this. They are not really the same guy in the way that they're part of a lineage or a bloodline. Remphan is actually the temple of Remphan. And when it says, hey, you're not supposed to worship in that temple with that particular symbol, go look it up. It was the star, right? It was a star. And they put it on that temple. And in 2 Timothy, we're told, don't do that. That's not a good thing. Don't use that. Well, people do it anyway. And guess what? It becomes like a good symbol, right? And then another symbol was demonized and told we're not supposed to use that symbol when that symbol predated the other one and it was used by ancient civilizations and it was a good thing. So some evil people get a hold of it and they said, well, they perverted it and they used it no, they didn't. They used it the way it was always used, but it was still used incorrectly. But these other people use an evil symbol and say, well, we're the good guys. And they put that symbol everywhere and everybody uses it and thinks it's cute. It's not. And the reason is because Remphan built that and used that symbol in honor of his father, Moloch, or his ancestor. And that's how ancient it is. And he was the bull-headed god who was the child eater, which is what they're doing now. They're harvesting us. 600,000 people in America alone go missing, right? 600,000. Children, that's just children, sorry. And then, 200,000 adults and maybe half of them are found? Where are the rest of them? Where are they going? Where are they at?
Insane number.
It's an insane number. Now, take a worldwide look. Because 8 billion people, and you think, well, there's only a few million, whatever, but that's still a huge number of people. And we're not noticing it worldwide because there's 8 billion people. The planet could actually sustain 10 times that many people. I'm being honest, because we're only using a little bit of the house money here. You don't understand that. That's what people don't grasp. I could get real deep into this. James, do you need to run? Do you need to go?
Oh, I'm just seeing my offspring doing things that he probably shouldn't do. I'll get to him in a moment. I just wanted to add, uh, thank you for having me on, and thank you for your audience. And I must say, I'm not just saying this to like brown nose you guys. I'm just saying as an objective fact that you guys are the best at what you do. There are many times when I have PRT playing in the background and pottering around my house, or if I'm working from home on a certain day, I have you guys in the background, right? Always. I do that every week. So I just want to thank you. And despite all the slings and arrows and the mud that's been hurled in your direction, you guys are still standing tall. And I really appreciate that, right? Because you guys are standing in the gap, all of you guys, Tony, Nelly, all you guys. I really appreciate and respect the heck out of you. What we're seeing here is spiritual warfare manifesting in the physical plane. It's multidimensional cosmic warfare. And I accept that. I'm not upset about it. I'm not angry about it. I recognize the multiple threat environment in which we're in. If you look at Mars, Dr. John Brandenburg's work, I'm satisfied that he's correct. He's proven that there have been at least 2 gigantic thermonuclear airbursts above Mars that probably wiped out at least, a huge swath of the surface population.
Yeah.
And what people don't understand, because I hear these debates go on amongst people who study this. Well, you know what? At best, that was like a Bronze Age civilization, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe, maybe not. What if that Bronze Age civilization, if that's what they were, what if they were just collateral damage? What if they wanted to get something else and those people just happen to be in the way? We see that all the time in our surface world. Black ops will take down an airliner just to get the one person that's a passenger. We know that, right? And if you follow Bode's law, there should be another large planet, variously described as Maldek, Tiamat, whatever the case may be, that was blown up. In its place, we have the asteroid belt, right? So, point being is that this planet, this solar system, is a battlefield, right?
Oh yeah.
So I recognize it for what it is. It's a multiple threat environment. And we are here. We are spiritual warriors. We are the sum of all of our parts. I think there may come a point in time when we will be able to reaccess that information, our know-how, understanding. For some reason, these deep black military and ET controllers, when they abduct us, they can access and exploit these innate metaphysical powers within us. Right? I wish we could do that. We could turn this whole paradigm around instantly if that was the case. But for some reason, they can do it. But you know what? We're trending in the right direction, and you and your team are a big part of that. So I want to thank you for. I do got to run, but I want to thank you and all of your crew over there and all of your wonderful fans. Please go to the CosmicSwitchboard.com. Check out the content. I think you'll like some of it. But thank you so much for having me on, Josh, and definitely want you to come back on my show at some point.
Yes, and let me know. Give me some dates, and I'll definitely do that. I don't do a lot of other people's shows, but I do friends shows.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Yeah, hit me up, man. I'll let you go. I'll let you run.
Thank you. See you, Anthony, Tony, Nelly, all of you. Love and appreciate
you. So much, James.
Yeah, thank you.
I was stoked to hear from you all day.
Yep.
Bye for now.
Bye. So, James Bartley, good friend and colleague and somebody that I've done research with, and we're kind of on that same wavelength of what is. So I have a few things I want to go over, and it's, I can't stress enough how important it is. People like to hear about ghosts. They want to hear about Bigfoot and Dogman. They want to hear about aliens and abduction and all this. It doesn't matter what your flavor of the paranormal is. And it's all paranormal. We need to get out of this mindset of that the paranormal is just a bunch of ghosts. I love ghosts. I love ghost hunters. I mean, ghosts is in the subject, ghosts. I love ghost hunters. I love Bigfoot as a subject. I've done a ton of it. I just Dogman, the Goat Man, aliens of all types, alien abduction. I know a lot about their craft and their different types. It doesn't seem to be as fascinating to a lot of people in my audience, so we don't talk about it as much. The abduction stuff is. But you need to understand something, and you need to understand it quickly. Okay, this is a war. And I don't mean with these moronic slings and arrows, like you're saying, these people attacking all the time. They're being used.
It's just a symptom of the real war.
Yeah, that's a symptom of the real war. And in their mind, they're on some kind of holy mission to shut us down because,
they believe they're following their own will.
Yeah,
and it's not the
you're
case.
not. And you're trying to stop something that needs to be done. It needs to be said. I have to do what I have to do. I'm going to tell you something, folks. When I was a child, I think I was 9 years old. And I might have said this before. I think it was 8 or 9. And we went on a trip to out west. And I remember we were in Oregon and I was at a camp and I went and I witnessed to these older children. They were like teenagers. And I was on a tree stump and I was teaching them about Christ. And when my parents went looking for me, they found me. And my parents, this is a true story. Anthony, you've heard my mom talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
And my mother was very proud of me.
Yeah, she remembers that dearly.
And she said, you were in there and there were all these older children. The oldest was probably 15, 16, and they're listening to an 8-year-old talk to them about Christ. And when my mom came and got me, they were like, where are you? I was like 2 or 3 campsites over and I was witnessing to them. I don't even know how it started. I don't remember it all. But my parents, they didn't make the connection at the time. Jesus did the same thing. And I'm not saying I'm Jesus. I'm not comparing myself to Jesus. He's my Lord and Savior. But he says, and I took it to heart as a child, to be like me, to do what you're supposed to do. We always fail. We're going to commit sin. We're going to do things that are not correct because it's in your nature to do that. We're fighting a war against our own nature even. It is a war. And it's a daily struggle. And please, everyone should strive to be like Christ, but don't take my words out of context. What I'm talking about is doing the best you can and being as much like Christ and what he expects of us. That's all it is. That's all it takes. Do what you can, do your part, because if we all sit back and wait around for somebody else to do it, it's like the whole thing about, cleaning the house. There's a mess in the house. And contrary to what the lies have been told about our house, we don't keep a messy, dirty house. Okay. So let me tell you this. If something is dirty and it's not done correctly, it's not clean. The other day, I just took a broom and started sweeping because the guys have been working. We've all been working. Everybody's tired. And I didn't feel like saying, hey, come help me do this. The big push broom that we needed was out at the ranch.
Yeah.
And so I took a small broom and I swept the entire downstairs and it hurt my back because the broom was too short. It was a small broom, about Maddie size broom. It was very tiny.
It's about the right size for her.
Yeah, it was like it was about a foot tall. I'm joking. I'm kidding. It's too big for her. Too tall. Okay. So I tried to sweep with this tiny broom but I did it. Why? Because it was dirty. The floor was dirty. It needed to be swept. We were moving all these boxes and stuff around and unpacking things. We're still unpacking things. And so, yeah, Dick Richards, it's Fraggle broom. It was a Fraggle broom. Yes, it was. But it got the job done. And then my wife's like, honey, you should have, asked for some help, whatever. I said, look, you know how lazy you all are. I have to do everything. I do everything myself. And pat myself on the back. That's what I do. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right. Just seriously. I'm joking. That's a joke. Nellie does a lot. She helps a lot. And Anthony and Tony and Scorp watch. They just sit there. They don't do anything.
Well, someone has to supervise.
Someone has to sit there and supervise with hands on their hips.
Yeah.
And that's not me.
It's not easy.
Like to do things.
Sometimes I have to shake my shirt sometimes.
Because it gets warm.
Yeah. And then I have to scratch my stomach. It's not easy. But hey, somebody's got to do it. And I'm willing to take one for the team.
Yeah. So, but my point is, if everybody just did that and grabbed a broom, you look how much easier it would be. A job that took me like an hour would take like 5 minutes if everybody cooperated. It just depends on how many people you can get to help you. The thought of people living close by one another or living together or trying to help each other and do all this other stuff. And no, Maddie doesn't live with us and we don't all live together. That's another myth that they created. Look, we do live close to one another because we help each other. right? Because you can help one another if you're, on the same level. But you got to think about this. What happened to that sort of community? What happened to that connectiveness? Why is it that people from other countries still have that community? They come from their country and they do the same thing that we should be doing. And they're very successful. They come here with very little, and I'm talking about people who do it legally too.
Yeah.
And they come here and they're very successful. And Americans are like, well, why don't we do? You know why? Because your children turn 18 and they move out and go to college, where they go into debt and they are indoctrinated into the program, which feeds right into the matrix. And then they become retarded. I'm not using it in a jokey, funny way. I'm not trying to trigger anybody. I'm talking their growth is it is retard. They go backwards. I don't mean that they become mentally, inefficient. I'm saying in some ways, but I'm saying it retards their growth spiritually, mentally, physically. It stunts it. College is not a good thing. Anybody who asks me right now, you tell me I went to college, good for you. I dropped out. And I became what would be considered in this, this society, would be the word, successful, a highly successful, highly functioning, and highly successful individual by today's standards. We've done well with ourselves. We've put, you go through lean times, and God knows I'm going through some lean times right now, but it'll get better because I know that eventually this show is going to get us where we need to be. And I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about just in every facet of our lives. You know why? Because you show up here and there's 600 people here after 2 hours and 40 minutes still watching us. I know we're on the right track. I don't give a shoot darn crap what these other people say and do, and we're not going to acknowledge it anymore because and I'll be honest, it was kind of fun for a little while, just laughing at how stupid they are, but it has to be stopped at some point because eventually, like too big to rig.
And if we weren't on the right track, it would be smooth sailing the whole time because
nobody would care.
Why try to stop us?
When you get to a certain point, a certain size, a certain level, they can do and say whatever the hell they want. And talking to Marzulli the other day, he basically says, look, I get attacked all the time. It comes with the growth, comes with the territory. Nonokio, same thing. A lot of these bigger, stronger channels that have been around for a long time, they told me, they're like, hey, they kind of pat you on the head and say, hey, keep your chin up. You'll be fine. I don't really necessarily need a pep talk. But it doesn't hurt every now and then to know that just be told you're on the right track. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're over the target and you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit with the shrapnel. You're going to get the flak. And we're catching it. One of these people, I remember this in particular, they made a post that said, let's make cryptids normal again. Well, let me tell you something, foolish person. When was a cryptid ever a normal thing? In the sense that he's talking about. Are you talking about a giant salamander that's being found somewhere in California? No, I'm not talking about that. Are you talking about Bigfoot and Dogman and whatever critter that you want to call these things? That's what they're referring to. Well, let me tell you something. They were never normal in the sense that we are. Do you understand that? So that's how ridiculous of a statement that is to make these outlandish statements. Because we aren't even really normal. And paranormal, what we consider paranormal, is closer to the real reality than you think. We are on the right track. And we're figuring things out bit by bit, day by day. Every encounter that we're given, and there's a bunch of them right here on this phone. I could tell you there's a billion of them right there. Anthony can attest to this. We every day.
Yep.
I'll read the headlines of some of these. I'm just going to open up my deal, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 new ones right there since the show started. Right? It never ends, folks. It is a long list.
And people want PRT to get their story specifically because of all the information that's being disseminated, and they feel like no one else is on the right track to the extent that this show is.
Here's one. I'm not even going to read what they said. I'm not going to say their name because I don't have permission yet to say their name. But one of them that I bookmarked just yesterday was ongoing demonic werewolf problem. That's the name of one. Another one is paranormal activity. That's just how they titled it. And it goes on and on and on. Black creatures scares my daughter and friends. Another one just says vampires, vampires, vampires. And another one just says vampires. Black Bigfoot. It just says black Bigfoot type. I don't know what that means, but that's, anyways, it just, this is all just right now in there. It just says right here, miles of bases. Trail cam footage of possible reptilian. And this is bunches of pictures. We got pictures. Just goes on and on and on. Dogman at window. Dogman scares my daughter. Ghost and Dogman. This says Ghost and Dogman. And then somebody says Orb. Okay, this is okay. Or Orb's evil. Somebody's asking a question and then it goes into a story. It just, I mean, there's a whole, it just goes on and on and on. The list of stuff. I don't understand. How can somebody sit there and say that they can't? What are you talking about? How can you not have these? I don't understand it. There are so many people out there, and people are starting to tap into that collective consciousness that we've been talking about. Now, tomorrow night, we haven't decided. We have 3 different possibilities of what we're going to talk about on the show. If you haven't listened to the episode that dropped yesterday on the podcast / YouTube episode, it was called
Interdimensional Shapeshifter.
Interdimensional Shapeshifter. Originally, Anthony had named it Imp Attachment or something like that, and I changed it. I said that doesn't do it justice. He didn't know what to call it though. The egg thing. Go back and listen. If you haven't listened to it, listen to it.
It's a fascinating concept.
It is a crazy story.
You don't hear it anywhere else.
Yeah, you don't hear it well, yeah, you do. I'm not going to lie and say that there are some people who've talked about these things, but listen to ours. Okay, I'm just saying. Shut up, Anthony. Shut up. Nobody else. Well,
it's not very common. Put it that way.
No, but there are people who talk about these things. I'm joking, but obviously, I don't care if you go somewhere else. But it's still this creature, like this woman, what she went through. It's, dude. I'm telling you, man. Like this is, and this isn't the first time we've heard of this. People feel more comfortable though telling us these things. You know, and there's going to be more. There's going to be more, and we're going to strike at the heart of their stronghold. I'm telling you, because they have us in a prison of the mind and of the spirit. Doing cleanses of yourself, your mind, body, and soul. It's very important, very, very important. Don't get distracted with this earthly nonsense. Don't. I'm telling you. Be strong in the spirit. The mind and the body will follow. The mind controls the body, right? Let the body listen to the mind, not the other way around. That's what's going to help you, right? Then you need to let the spirit do what it does and take control of your mind. I put an article up on my Facebook. This is most important. Listen to what I'm going to tell you. This guy, he had less than 9% of his brain. He was a functioning adult with an IQ near 100. I mean, he was almost like just absolutely normal. What does that tell you? There are people that this has happened to too.
Yeah, I remember reading about another guy who was missing most of his brain in Fate magazine years ago. And he was a security guard actually, and he was perfectly functioning person, just average productive member of society. He had no idea that he was missing most of his brain.
And you notice how there are people who are researching and going out and looking for these creatures with no backup plan as to what they're going to do when they find them.
Yeah. Hurling our bodies into the void without any inclination as to who or what is out there.
Hurling your bodies into the void. And then he leans in, without the slightest inkling of who or what is out there. Yeah, it is. It's true. And you worry. You're thinking, man, I'm worried for these people because what are you going to do when you find it? I know what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? And I'm not really looking for them. I'm looking to go, I'll show you where they were, with the hope in the back of my mind that we really don't want to run into them. And when these people say they do, they're fools. You're a fool. Unless you are very spiritually grounded, and 99% of these people are not. They are not. They have no idea. You see this bracelet I've been wearing the last couple? This is a grounding bracelet. Do you even know what that does? Look it up, figure it out, because you're going to need it. Look up magnetites. They go good with this. I had one up here, but it's gone. Somebody took it. I blame Nellie because my wrist fits her ankle. So I see her. She was wearing my magnetite. She's like, I have no idea where your magnets. She's got both of them on her ankles. Okay, honey, because my wrist is the size of your ankle. But that's fine. I'll get some more. They're not a big deal. These are expensive, but the other ones are not. But you get grounded, folks. I'm telling you. There is an energy that's all around us. Tesla talked about it. All these people who talked about these things, they ended up unalived. I had a good friend of mine reach out to me the other day. Well, he was at the conference I was at recently, and he says, "What are you going to do if they decide that they don't like what you're saying? Are you prepared for that?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm not. But the world doesn't work the way you want it to, just because you want something. Pain and suffering are born from want. I don't want to live or die. I just want to be. And it's going to come to me one way or the other, but I know that God's going to take care of me. I'm just a man. My favorite, we were doing Flash Gordon earlier with mean commercials, obviously, but well, maybe not obviously. Maybe you didn't know what that was, but that's when he says that foolish earthlings, he's all, it was a great movie, right? But you got to remember something. The best lines of that movie were actually not in the movie. It was sung by Queen. And in that anthem of Flash Gordon, this is most important to me. And I want to tell you this. Like I said, Jesus was the only one. There was nobody like him. All I was doing as a child was trying to do what I thought was right and be like him and teach people what he said. But there's a line in that song where it says, he's just a man with a man's courage. Nothing but a man, but he can never fail. And then it talks about him being pure at heart and whatever. And he can never lose because he's a good guy. Because he does what is right. And that's the most important. People don't realize that. Flash Gordon was a hero, right? He was a big hero in the movie, or in the comic books, the old time stories. But the point was that he was just a man. And he took his man's courage. Jesus used to always refer to himself as the Son of Man. Right? He made you know that he was born of a man. He was just like us, and he was going through this human experience that he did not have to go through. That he did it because he was told, by God, his Father. And his Father, in the way that he was the cosmic mind that gave him everything he had and everything he was. And you know what they did? This is what they did. And think about it. This is very important to know. They accused him of being an Egyptian magician. They said he was in Egypt and he studied magic from the temple of Set, and he learned all this dour, black magic power, whatever. He was running around, and doing all these evil things. He learned to levitate and do things and fireball or something. They had some, The Pharisees went and got somebody. He comes out and goes, "Yes, I challenge you to a duel, Jesus." And he takes his wand and he's like, And Jesus is like, oh, well, let me just turn this water into wine real quick. Ah, you are a witch. What is that guy? What is the other guy? Well, he's one of us. He's not a Galilean like you, Jesus. They said all kinds of crazy things. They did all kinds of crazy things. Said all kinds of nonsense. And they knew. They'd figured it out. He was in ashrams in India. For 18 years, he was gone. Where was he? You think he was just pedal farting around in that little bit of a region of the Levant? No, he did go to Egypt. He also went to India. There are records of him there. There are records. There is a guy who, his name was Gordon something. He tried to do, and I said Flash Gordon, I said it's funny, it's kind of a synchronicity, but his name was Gordon, something Gordon or Gordon something. He tried to do a documentary, and he went to India. He was killed. He was killed, and some people think he was actually murdered by the remnants of what they call the Thuji or the Thugi. They killed him because he was trying to retrace the steps of Jesus in India, and guess what? Nobody else has done it since. That was back in like the 30s or something. He was killed. And it's insane when you look at this, and they've tried to cover up the truth. They've hidden it from you of who Jesus was. And there are people who actually still believe that Jesus was like this skinny white guy in the images that we got. You know who that image of that is? That's Michelangelo's boyfriend. On the crucifixes from the Catholics, yeah, that's what that is. That's a model. That's not what Jesus looked like. He looked more like Anthony. Look at Anthony. Take a look at him. He looked more like...
Working?
Yeah, it did.
It's not working? Okay.
He
didn't look like a white guy with long hair.
He looked more like you than me.
Yeah.
I mean, and then that's the truth. So he traveled, basically what would be the Silk Road. I mean, that's what he did. And people don't understand that. Yeah, Alan, some people believe it was Caesar Borgia, but I don't know. The myth, it could be, the truth could be that it was Michelangelo because he did it and he used his boyfriend. But it was very, well, the Roman Emperor memoirs said Jesus had fair skin and hair. I don't know about that. I know what the Bible says, but it could be different. There could be somewhere in the middle. But he was in the Levant in a desert climate, so it would stand to reason that he would be of a different hue. And one of the things that you would learn about in India would be the caste system of the Hindus. And Jesus says this isn't correct because you're born as a locksmith or a blacksmith or a silversmith doesn't mean you have to stay that, because when you die, that's what's most important. To them, it was most important is how you came back. And Jesus told them, you don't have to come back. He told them, he says, you don't have to come back here. You come back here because you're choosing to not follow what I'm telling you. And then they wanted to kill him. Supposedly, he spent 6 years there in India. And there's places you can go to find this. Go look it up, Jesus in India. Go look up Jesus in Japan. Go look up Jesus in China. There's a ton of information out there. Now, some of it's been clipped. But like we said before, there are other mediums to get to. You don't have to use that particular, what's it called?
Search engine.
Search engine. Because they have a vested interest here in keeping you ignorant. And like I've said before, and in Tibet, thank you. Yes, it was in Tibet too. They want to cut down every single thing but a little bit of the Bible. And so you're given this little bit of soup. There's no meat left, hardly. There's a little bit, not much. And it's enough to get you, give you a little bit of satiation for a little while. And what's there is not necessarily bad. Although some of it was rewritten and not written correctly because it was written by fallible men. Just like the Quran. I don't care what they say. They're always like, oh, it's the word of God, brother. It hasn't been changed. It never will. Yeah, okay, whatever. You keep believing that. Do you really think the powers that be are just going to give you the tools that you need to survive, or even better yet, to defeat them without you doing any work for it? You're going to have to do the footwork, man. We're laying it out there for you. You just have to go and open it up and do it. And Israel was a man, not a place. Yeah, thank you for saying that too. So Wolf, do you consider yourself a starseed? I'm not going to get into that. I'm not an indigo child. I know that what's his name was told that he was an indigo child. Our old co-host Armando. I've been told I'm a lot of things, but I don't necessarily adhere to it. You know, there's been a lot of people who've told me a lot of things. So there is a record of Jesus all over the Middle East. He went to Persia, which is modern day Iran. He went all over the Middle East. The records, though, that we get are predominantly it's 18 years of him gone. We get only the part where he's in, Judea. He wasn't welcome there. But, he wasn't really welcomed in a lot of places. They didn't really like him in Egypt either, because he went up there and said, Amun-Ra is not God, Well, who is God? And he says, my father. Who's your father? And then they chased him out. He went to India and he said, Brahman is not really God. You're missing the point. And he studied with him and he learned, but he said, look, I'm not really accepting what you're saying, but some of it is correct, but not all of it. And he said the same thing to the Jews in Judea. He did the same thing in all of these places. And in Galilee is not Judea. I'm sorry. They're like, he's Jewish. No, he wasn't. He actually was a Galilean. The Judeans, by their strict rules, he was not Jewish. That is not true. And people are going to go run and go, oh, we got him now. He said Jesus wasn't Jewish. Because he wasn't. He was a Galilean, a Nazarene.
So he wouldn't have been
he wouldn't have. He was
considered
not
Jewish proper by the rules of his time.
They did not like that either when he said, he goes, I'm the Son of God, because they're thinking a certain being. They're not looking at what he's talking about. He says, oh, you're confused. My father is not your father. My father is the God Most High. You're worshiping Shaitan. You know that, right? He's the guy that runs this world. That is the fundamental problem. They tried to kill him in the ashrams of India. You know who did it? The Brahmins. I told Keem that one day. I said, people tried to kill my Lord and Savior, right? Mm-hmm. He said, yeah, so did the Jewish people and the Romans. I said, semantics. Right now we're talking about you and your sin. your sin. No, I was just teasing with him,
Yeah.
But, the point is, though, I've told RS that too. I said, you're a Zoroastrian priest tried to kill my Lord and Savior. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, you're Persian. And I told Pete that too. He's Jewish. I said, you people, you did what you did. You tried to kill my Lord and Savior. And he just laughed. I said, why are you laughing? You're all guilty. You voted for Hugh Humphrey and you tried to kill Jesus. And some of you succeeded. The point being is that I do that too. You're Italian. I'm like, look, you're Italian, right? Look what you did. Look what you did. You Roman scumbag. You're Judean, Roman, Persian, Brahmin, Indian, all of you. You tried to murder Jesus. How dare you? And Jesus forgave him. He's like, everywhere I've been, the Egyptians too. I tell Muhammad that works for us, I was like, you people tried to kill my Lord and Savior. No, the Romans. I said, yeah, the Romans, Jews, whatever. You did it too. You did. You tried. You didn't succeed. They succeeded. You didn't. But guess what? It didn't work because he's risen. He came and he said, look, behold, I'm alive. You're not going to stop me. Many will come in my name, right? And then there's going to be countless antichrists. The problem with the Antichrist is it is a system and it is a group of people. Believe it. There was a contemporary of John, and that would have been Nero. These evil beings with their groups and what they do, let me tell you something. They don't stop at one try. They don't stop at 2 tries. They don't stop at a dozen. They don't stop at 1,000. They keep going. These reptilians we're talking about, they've been around for thousands, maybe even millions of years. They've been doing what they do. They go from system to system doing what they do. Do you not think our Father is one step ahead of them? He's always one step ahead of them. The vampiric things that we talk about, these things, if you don't believe in vampires, go read the story of Orneus and Solomon. It's very clear. He was drinking blood from a child, and he was caught doing it, which led to them being imprisoned. And then they built the temple. Now, here's my question, though. Why would you allow demons to build your temple? That's a question I've always wondered. I know what I think, but I'm not going to blurt it out. I don't know 100% everything, folks, but we're learning together, aren't we? And this is the whole point. That's why people like James Bartley come on, and what they say is so important, because they're verifying what we've been doing, and then they're adding to what's happening here. What's happening here on our channel is not, this is not what's happening on other channels. People are learning, and we're doing it in real time, because these channels, I applaud them. There's a lot of really good ones out there. There's some really good work being done by a lot of good people. Believe me. Believe me. I acknowledge their work, but they're not doing it on a live stream like we are. There's a lot of people doing live streams, and they're doing good work too. But I'm talking about the learning and the growing that is happening in real time on a live stream. And like I said before, it takes a lot of balls to sit up there on a live stream with hundreds of people or thousands of people, or how many people you got on your live stream. And because you make a mistake, you're right there, and everybody makes fun of you.
Yeah, there's no delete button.
And here's what I say. I don't give a crap about you. Make fun of me, talk about, make groups. They make entire groups. Somebody messaged me the other day, and they said, I left this group because they were mocking me. And it's not that one that they made that's specifically about me. It's another group where they've turned it into sport to mock me and other YouTubers or podcasters, because they're out in the woods, wiping their butt with leaves or whatever they're doing. I don't care what you're doing. And I don't care about your pretend data. I don't
The hiking channels.
The hiking channels. I don't give a shit. There's a couple of them I respect. The rest of them can just go fall into the lake or ocean or whatever. I don't care. So you got to understand something, folks. We're on the cusp of something that's very real. And we are entering, like what James said, this age, this era is coming to an end. And we are heading for this cataclysm. And they can do whatever they want. They can build this thing in Geneva, and they can punch holes into the world, universe, or whatever they is. They can connect with alternate realities. It's not going to change what is going to happen. Because I believe in the words of Christ, and they are going to lose. They're going to lose. It's going to happen. So now what I'm going to do before I bail here, I'm going to tell you what is it that you guys want. If your name is in green, I'm going to give you something. We have these right here. These are really cool. I like these.
Yeah. Let me get the other one too.
Yeah. I'm going to get another one. Let me put one on here. Let me see if my big head can fit into this hat. Let me see here. If I can get it on. There it goes. Oh, I guess my head's a little bit not as big as I thought it was. There it is. That's built flat. I'm not going to, change it or whatever. You can do what you want with it. You can fold it, bend it, whatever. But it's got the black bill, and it's got this logo on there. What do you think of that? Patty says, I'm a cat man. You can take. I'm over here touching on the wrong side. You can take this and you can leave it on. You can walk around and be like, "Yo, player, I keep the tag on my hat. I know it looks goofy, but that's what I do. I keep it real. I keeps it real. You know, real dumb. You can do that, and you can leave the sticker on there or whatever you want to do. I don't care.
Here's the other one.
This is another one. Another one. Let's see here. And there's this one. This one looks real gangster right here. Are you looking at me? Are you staring at my hat? Why are you staring? Are you gonna make me look up? Because I got a guacamole, cyanide in the guacamole. It's a stapler, my stapler, and I will have to take my gat and unload on your ass, you whack ass. I don't know. It's whichever you like. It's your choice, but here it is. So what we can do is we're going to give one of these, I guess, maybe tonight. We'll do that, right? And then we can do it again on Sunday.
Yeah.
All right. Make sure you tell me what you won. Don't be lying. Don't be lying. You know what this is? My stapler. You think that's a stapler? That's what I use. I use this. I use this. Like he lost his mind. There's no coming back from this one. He's gone now. That's it. There's nobody gonna listen to him no more. Good. He's over with. He's gone.
When you get really bad, I use this one right here. This is the worst one. This is what mess you up, spank your little butt, make you hurt. It's painful. It's really, really painful right here. You're not gonna like this at all. I didn't like this at all. One time I was acting up really bad, and my mama hit me with this thing. It hurt really bad. It's gonna hurt you too. You better watch yourself. You better watch who you're talking to.
Watch yourself.
You better watch how you're looking at me and watch how
you looking at us.
You better check your tone. I like the way you're looking.
You better watch yourself.
You don't like the hand in your face.
We're gonna show you what you're
not gonna like it on your butt.
It looks like it's got some kind of debris on it. What is that?
It does?
Looks like you killed a gnat with it. Splat.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what that is.
I posted a video on my Facebook the other day where this turtle, he was trying to eat something and he was like, and he spit it out in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
And he goes over to it and he slaps it with it.
Yeah.
He slaps it with it. It's so funny. He's mad. He's like, he goes over there and he's like, slaps it with his flipper. That's what that reminds me of. Just bam. Tony says, "You gotta hand it to you." I'm
you should dub
intimidated.
that turtle video with that.
Brother. Why, brother? Why?
What is that? And then he smacks it.
Yeah, he smacks it with his flipper. Scorp says, "I like the gray and black hat." Well, it's not about you, Scorp. Okay.
Melissa, have you won anything from us before? I think you have, but I'm not sure. I just noticed you spoke up like before anyone else that you really wanted to win. So
where's that at? Where'd she do that?
It's like as soon as you brought out the hat, she was like the first one to say, "Yes, please, I want one." But I don't know if she's won before.
So let's go ahead and we got almost 500 people in here. Let's Rogue status says, "I win every day."
Well, we all win every day. If you're here with us,
that's right. Rogue says,
you win every time.
You're a winner.
You can't.
That's the shape of BMW. You a winner.
We can't stop winning and winning bigly.
We win. People hate that.
All we do is win.
You notice what we notice is when we say we win, the hate just pours onto us. And folks, we're being mass reported again. The algorithms are showing that we are being attacked. And these people, it doesn't matter. You're going to slow us down. So what? It's just, we're still going to climb that hill. It doesn't matter. You can keep on playing games.
So Melissa said that it's been since June last year that she won. So
well, Melissa, what did you win? Exactly, Rogue. Joseph says, "I want a book. I want a book," he says. Do you want a book, Joseph? Have you won before? Joseph says, "I would love an autographed book." You would? That's cool. So if it's only $5 to join and become a member and enter into the giveaway. So if anybody wants to join right now and be ready for Sunday, because there's 3 different stories that we might tell on Sunday. We don't know what we're going to do. I don't want to tell you, and then you'll be like, "Oh, Because you know what happens? You know what happens? And it's kind of funny. Like I'll tell people, like we're going to talk about this on the show, and then I get emailed. And it's not like an avalanche, but it's a few people. They're like, I don't want to hear about that on there. I want to hear about this. And I'm like, okay, well, too bad, because that's what we're kind of. D says, I want a Leviathan. You gonna dance around with it like what's his name? Buffalo Bill. Yeah. Puts the lotion on skin and gets the Leviathan again. That thong goes right thong, 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 thong.
That music playing.
Lord says I'd buy a Leviathan.
Like 90s techno.
Don't tell people that.
Playing.
You don't want people knowing that.
So JD Smooth said he's never won, and he'd like to wear get a shirt.
JD Smooth is like an OG. He's been around forever. He's never won?
I guess not.
Okay, well, send us your information. And Joseph Gross says he wants a book. Joseph, have you won before? If not, then y'all two will be. You could win. Head trip. Ooh, brother. Brother. Ooh. I can't believe Nelly. Nelly cracks me. She is such a funny person. Dude. You have no idea what it's like to live with me and Nelly. Anthony, me and Nelly, Tony, Scorpion, not really so much Maddie. She's a new person. I don't put her in the category with us. But all the rest of it. No, she's pretty funny too. Everybody, we laugh a lot. I had somebody ask me that the other day. We were talking on the phone. I was getting his story. And he goes by the name of Kronos, master of all time. Anyway, his nickname is Kronos, whatever. He calls himself that in the email. You go look it up, Anthony, if you want to. He's got a pretty amazing story. But he was telling me his encounters, and he says, "What do y'all do?" I hear people laughing. I said, "Yeah, we do laugh a lot. It's a very joyful house. We argue sometimes and get into it, and you know how it goes. I'm a brute, and I beat people into submission. They behave. But the trains run on time, comrade. All right, you know how it goes. But anyways, yeah, that's so. So Joseph, if you want a book, just send me your information and say, hey, I want a book. Well, I think Kronos, he says he eats his baby. I think he's referring to it more as like the master of time. I said, so was Kukulkan. He demanded, supplication in the way of mass slaughter. But, and yeah, you're right, Rogue. It is. It's an art form for sure. And Lauren says, hope he doesn't eat the children's. No, I don't think he is. That's just his whatever, And Max Hawthorne, he's got those Kronos series books. They're actually pretty interesting. I got one the other day. So shout out to Max. He's been an author. He's been on the show, and he talks. It's this weird like great white shark. Could it still be alive? This extinct species of great white. You got to remember though, the great white when it was becoming more prevalent in the oceans, they were way larger than the ones we have today. So the ancestor of the great white was this humongous species of shark, which was about 40 feet long, which is crazy to think about. But at the same time, the killer whales were coming into their own. So this is probably why the megalodon went extinct, which I don't believe that the megalodon would look as much like the great white as we would think it does. It could have looked somewhere, not just like a tiger shark, but something in between a tiger shark and a great white. Either way, it's not something I would want to be in the water with. Okay. I don't even like the sharks that we have nowadays in the water. I don't want that. Who the hell wants that? You're out there frolicking in the ocean, just minding your own business in their habitat where they live and hunt and kill. And then they just come and start messing with you. And you're like, dude, I'm just in your house. Why are you mad? And they start to eat you. And you're like, this isn't fun. I'm not having a good time now. That's why I don't do it. I only go about 2 feet out. That's about it. I'm good. I'm just like, hey, water. And I run back and then I go to the hotel swimming pool. Because I'm a big guy and I don't want to be out there in the water. And they're like, dang, there's a seal He's big too, and it's close to the shore. I'm gonna go get him. It's just, you know, I didn't know there were seals out here, but there's one here. I'm gonna get him. He's good. Because I don't know, in the Gulf of America, I don't know if that's where I should be swimming around, in the Gulf of America, being attacked. So Joseph, you're a winner tonight. Let's see what Joseph says. He says, what do you think about sirens and mermaids? They're real, and they will unalive you. And look up the episode we did about the Galveston. What was that one called? The one with the lady from Galveston, remember? We never talked to her because she wasn't alive anymore, but her nephews told us the story.
Was that a live stream? I think that was a live stream. I don't remember the name of it.
I can't remember if it was a live stream or it was a podcast episode, but it was from Galveston, and the woman was basically, I can't remember. But right now, if you're a member of the channel, I'm going to give you the option right now to tell me what you want to talk about on Sunday, because we haven't decided yet. There's a lot of different stuff that we could discuss. We have a pretty terrifying Bigfoot encounter we could get into. We have another Goatman encounter, but I'm not going to do it that soon, right after the one we did on Wednesday. But I mean, there's a lot of different directions we could go. What do you guys want to hear about? Because there's about 3 different ones, and they're all different subjects. I mean, it's all connected, you know, like we've talked about, but it's up to you. Somebody says witches. That was Monday. Everybody was talking about witches on Monday. David Jones Locker, what's up, man? He says, glory to the good Lord, our Father. Yes. Skinwalker report. Which one, man? Because we've gotten so many under fire. Underworlds. There's a lot of inner earth stuff too. Shadow people, man. I had a weird dream earlier today, and I woke up and I was like saying shadows. And I was like, what the heck is it? Why am I saying this? Like, it was, I don't know. Entrances to the inner earth. Well, we got stories. What do you want to hear about? You want to hear about Shambhala, Lemuria, Shangri-La? There's so many. There's all these different entrances. The Rake. What do you think, Anthony? He said stories about blood-sucking vamps. Yeah, we've done a lot of those, Alice.
I mean, I'm partial to the inner earth entrances. I can't quite put my finger on it, but that just piques my interest.
Or we could just do like a potluck.
Yeah.
You know, with some of those like middle of the road stories that aren't super long, and, you know, where I dramatize them, bring them out, whatever. I don't know. Maybe we could do the inner earth. There's a lot of it. I mean, like we were talking about tonight with James Bartley, and what he touched upon about the, like, what is essentially hieroglyphs.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you know, one symbol could tell you a lot.
Yeah.
Because it conjures the mind. And there's so much out there, you know, it boggles the mind how many people have lived and died on this planet. Everybody has a story. And the sad thing to me is so many people saw so many things, and they pass away, and they don't. I got one. There was a woman, her name was Natalie. I'm trying to remember what her father's name was, but anyway, he was passing away in a hospital, and he was in Virginia, and he was on his deathbed, and he was dying. He was in hospice, and before he went unconscious, and then a day later he had passed away. He just started talking, and they recorded part of what he said, and it was just like so much. It was just all these encounters that he'd had. But he came from a different time, and this was, she took one of those old timey tape recorders. She has all these tapes, and she digitized them about 10 years ago. Thank God, because some of them had fallen apart. Because people don't realize cassettes.
Yeah, they degrade.
They degrade.
I mean, even CDs will.
They all degrade over time. Nothing lasts forever.
Even digital music degrades over time.
It will. It'll degrade. And that's the thing that people don't understand, why everything has degraded to a certain point, and that's why you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence of any of this stuff because it's gone. Everything tries to go back to its natural form, its natural state. And so this man started talking about a lifetime of encounters with what can only be described as the Fae, or like some sort of entities. And he had been taken for years to the underworld. And he was desperate to try to not. And one of the things that they had conditioned this guy to not talk about Christ, because when he did, they would get real upset. So he never accepted Christ, but then he did it like 6 months before he was dying. He was diagnosed, and then he accepted Christ. And guess what? It stopped. So he was tormented for years by this. And it was back in the early 90s, I believe, when she recorded everything that he had said, but not everything, but a lot of it. Because he was talking, he goes, I got to tell you all this stuff. And it was a lot. So she wants me to try to help her, I don't know, tell the stories or the encounters. Mm-hmm. And it was something that really, the fact that she wanted me to tell I was blown away by that. But then the fact that when you stop and you think about the enormity of what this guy went through, and he was like 77 years old when he was passing away in the early 90s. Now, his daughter was born, he was already in his mid 40s when she was born. So yeah, but it just, and she's older now, but it's crazy when you stop and you think about this. And most of this information was disseminated to me by her daughter, which would be, and her husband, which would be her children. So I was able to speak to her and get, but I can't believe like this guy held all this in, because he was from a time where, and you got to understand something, folks, he was thought of as crazy. I mean, mm-hmm. If you went and told people I've been being taken by, elves and taken to a dark world, to another world that exists beyond our understanding, and at one point they took him through a hole, which can only be described as the inner earth, and the guy, I felt terrible. Like he lived his life like that. And then they may or may not have been responsible for actually killing him, and he accepted Christ, and, so they were, and it's actually, I'm wrong about one part. Before he was diagnosed, he accepted Jesus. Like he had said, he had gone in for some tests, and they basically came to him and they said, look, if you do this, you're going to die. But if you don't do this, you're going to live. And so he chose Jesus, because living is not about living in this world. It's about living in eternity. And so that was very, and so he had this lifetime of experiences that had started when he was a child, and he held most of it in. One person that he confided in was his grandmother, and she passed away because she told him these are the fairies or whatever. But where they were taking him, though, he was intermingling with other beings that were not fairies, and they weren't humans. And so he decided to keep it all in. And then his brother was going through it too. And I guess this is a big part of what scared him. He was no coward, but his brother ended up being judged and told, hey, you got to go to a insane asylum, and what a way to, I don't know, man. It's like, and this guy was in World War II, and his brother didn't go overseas to fight because he was in an insane asylum, because he talked about what he had seen. So this guy kept his mouth shut. Then on his deathbed, he's like, look, I got to tell you, all this stuff is true. Everything my brother was saying was true. This really happened to us. And they were Irish twins. They were a year apart. His brother was a year younger than him, or a year older than him. So he watched his older brother get taken away, and his brother never backed down for years. And they were going to let him out as long as he just said it wasn't true. That's how evil the system was set up, you know, and it's still, now they've made it look like it's such a joke that, you know, they can talk about it, like James was saying, in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody thinks anything of it. They think, well, this isn't real. This is, you know, I don't know. So it's just I don't know. Josie Wells says, "Wolf, your experience of your haunted building is scared to turn into a screenplay. How would that work? I don't even know how that would work. Never thought about it."
Yeah, I think that would actually be a good movie.
You could probably do that with a lot of people's encounters. I mean, you know, be careful. And this is something that Seth Breedlove brought up the other day. I was, you know, on his Facebook. He just said, be careful when you give people your stories. If they want you to sign something, this is what the networks do. They take the rights to your encounter.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be real careful when you do that. That has made me decline or balk at a lot of invitations to do this and do that. And I'm like, nah, I'm good, because you're not going to take my personal encounters and hold them from me. So. Josie Will. So I take it you just watched that one or listened to it recently. Maybe that's why you're talking about it. But that one, that happened to me. It really did. And that's some freaky stuff, dude. There were other people that I'm still friends with to this day that witnessed some of that phenomenon too. Not as much as I did, but they could attest to it. So anyways, folks, congratulations to the winners. Send us your information, giveaways, prtpodcast.com, right? Giveaways,
Josh Turner. Giveaways at prtpodcast.com.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being the best part of what makes PRT what it is. We'll see you on Sunday. Good night. Mm-hmm.